You guys are gonna have to tell me how the volume is, okay? I'm gonna start play. I'm gonna hit play, and you guys let me know if the volume is poo poo, okay? Okay.
We got it all. The secrets of Disco Elysium, the extended lore, the cut content and the crackpot theories. This video proceeds from discoveries that you might have already made in your own playthrough to the increasingly obscure and unsettling
old man
secrets
romance
of the world of Elysium. And before we descend to the final layer of the iceberg, I will also rapid fire through a few honorable mentions, so stay tuned for that. Recruiting Kuno. If you fail to save Kim at the tribunal, you will wake up to the company of your friendly neighborhood gremlin, Kuno.
They say you got a lot of people killed, like half the town. They say you didn't do shit. I guess that's cool, so I thought I'd stick around.
If you decide to join forces, Kuno will take up Kim's empty follower slot to accompany you through the last chapters of the game and offer his valuable insights to the investigation.
Does Kuno know?
Is it not the wisest man who knows he knows nothing?
Yeah, Kuno's fucking wise like that.
My personal highlight of the unlikely duo, however, is him defending you in front of your precinct when your colleagues question the success of your investigation.
You dinky fucking asshole! This pig right here, this oink oink motherfucker, solved that shit on Death Island. Hey, solved, go home or fuck off.
And if everything goes right, you can even invite him to come with you to enter the junior officer program.
Aww.
Thank you, Kuno.
The mysterious pair of eyes. If your Harry is particularly perceptive, he can spot two suspicious eyes spying on him through the little gap between the harbor gates.
I'm a mysterious pair of eyes.
The eyes are the rarest encounter in the game, not just because you need a perception stat of 9 or more to notice them, but because you need to fulfill that requirement before the end of the first day, after which they will disappear again. We still don't know whose watchful eyes we're really talking to, just that they've spied on Harry's drunken shenanigans since before the game even started.
We've had our eye on you for quite some time.
The fact that the eyes share a voice actor with the Hardy Boy leader Titus had led some to believe that it's him trolling Harry from behind the gate. But Disco Elysium writer Argo Tulik dismissed this connection as a simple matter of convenience in the recording studio. We can, however, assume that the eyes are affiliated with the Union, since they're on the other side of the gate that they closed for the strike. And after all, Union boss Everard Clare does have his spying eyes all around town.
Everard probably has eyes on us.
I am what people call a local bigwig. I know everything that goes on in Martinez.
I'm surprised that they have these little rare mysterious eyes and don't say who or what it is. What could be looking from the inside of the harbor? I mean, it has to be a Union guy, but that's weird. That's weird that they didn't confirm anything.
Making Harry blind. Perception is a funny skill. You can crank it all up to spot the creepy eyes, but you can also get it down to 0 by starting with a low initial stat and then stacking debuffs from items and thoughts. Once Harry's perception hits 0, he becomes functionally blind and unable to interact with objects and characters around him. You can't even go to bed or use a door, because that would require you to see them. At that point, you become unable to play the game until you invest a skill point or make better fashion choices.
Wait, that's actually so... I like that this game includes those little details, right? Like, your skills actually matter so much that your perception... Like, because I think I watched something where if you have a low enough perception or electrochemistry, you can't even see, like, some of the bottles or cigarettes on the ground that you can randomly pick up. Like, they're just not there. It's crazy how much, like, the skills really matter. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because they talk so much to you in the dialogue as well, but it's cool that they like actually change your gameplay.
Recruiting Lena. As our first piece of cut content, we have a planned in-game companion. Lena, the lovely wheelchair-bound granny, was originally intended to be an available partner in crime fighting. That was back in the early development stages when they planned to have multiple companions for you to choose from. The devs, however, had to drop her from the roster because at that point they already made Martinez into a place that wasn't exactly wheelchair-friendly. Lena still references this when you try to recruit her in the finished game.
Thank you, but Martinez isn't the most wheelchair-accessible place, you see. Perhaps another time.
Ableism.
Early Phasmid discovery. For many of us, encountering the Insulindian Phasmid was not only magical, but also the most surprising encounter of the game. But what if I told you that it didn't even have to be a surprise, because it has been right there on our screens the entire time? Before you even
What?
talk to the deserter, you can just walk up to the phasmid to see it casually standing in the reeds. You can't interact with it yet, but it has been there
Oh my
all
God,
the
it is
time,
there.
observing you and the deserter. It really goes to show how well its camouflage works. The deserter's point of view. When you boot up Disco Elysium, you load into the main menu and see a beautiful animated panorama of Martinez's waterfront. Once you progress to the last parts of the game, you might notice that the viewpoint of the menu's artwork is the sea fortress and, more specifically, the sniper's nest that you find on top of it. It's the very place from where the bullet was shot that kicked off the events of the game. You, the player, were presented with the shooter's position when you first launched the game, before you even began your playthrough and learned about the murder. The recent mobile port too features a view from the deserter's sniper's nest with Clausi's hotel room in its dead center.
You can do whatever you want.
Measurehead's erectile dysfunction and the Seaman Retention Society. When
What?
the Semini supremacist John Luke, or Measurehead, lets you in on the most advanced doctrines of modern race science, he mentions how
no Simonese man could maintain an erection in the suffocating potato stench of a Koiko woman.
When he says this, Empathy remarks that there is a
Strange sadness in his tone. Your eyes bounce to the young woman at his side.
You will also notice that, curiously enough, his own girlfriend is, in fact, a Koika, meaning an immigrant from the Grad Isola. Then, at the end of the fascism political quest, we are rewarded with a sit-in with our favorite Giga racist. There you can confront him with your observation about his girlfriend, and Logic is quick to mention that the sexually disabling potato smell he mentioned simply does not exist.
There is no potard smell, just making it clear.
Measurehead of course avoids the implication and instead responds that ejaculating is overrated for him anyway, since he is a proud member of the
Seaman Retention Society. The SRS is a closed group of strong-willed individuals who have dedicated themselves to building up strategic seaman reserves.
Bro is practicing No Nut November all year long.
As a card-carrying SRS member, Measurehead naturally considers it beneath him to engage in such low-concept activities as biological reproduction. This is of course quite a contradiction for a man who otherwise spends most of his time preaching about how genetic competition is every man's true purpose.
The man whose essence is passed on to the most hosts fulfills his biological purpose to the greatest extent.
Measurehead's lectures about the repulsive Koika smell, his equally made-up tales of disfigured interracial hybrids, and his strict semen retention regime all seem to be coping mechanisms for him underperforming in the only domain that truly matters to him. Perhaps he would fare better in bed if he didn't expose himself to the accumulated performance pressure of his past and future racial bloodline, and instead just had a little fun with his girl.
Racists can't get off. Now we know. Hi, Kaido. We're watching the Disco Elysium Iceberg.
The homosexual underground. When Harry
they're
first
gay.
meets the smoker on the balcony, he's confused about why he's so fascinated by the mysterious and attractive young man. Kim, who has been smirking during the entire encounter, is understandably amused about it.
His shirt. No, I don't know why his shirt is always unbuttoned.
He's barely holding it together. It's all he can do to keep from bursting out in laughter.
When you meet the smoker again, you can pass a legendary composure check to ask,
Could he be a member of the homosexual underground?
Why? Do you want to investigate?
The smoker then reveals that he does in fact belong to his so-called pleasure group meeting on
Flirting.
weekend nights. Our amnesic protagonist confesses that, since he is still in the process of reassembling his identity, he's unsure how he relates to all of that on a sexual level. But
Who knows, maybe you were homosexual in the past. Maybe all of that has been repressed.
the conversation
True.
rewards you with a thought that lets you ruminate about your sexuality for 8 hours with no conclusion. This, however, does not stop you from inquiring as to whether Kim is a member of the homosexual underground. And if you wear him down long enough, he eventually gives in and says,
But am I? I'll spare you another 20-hour mind project. Yes, I am.
This is all the homosexual underground thought rewards you with. You get no stat bonuses of any kind and no 10% bonus damage. Just the option to ask your partner if he's gay, which he will confirm and never bring up again.
Now let's get back to work.
They could be gay together.
Dolores Who? The Alternative Dream. The
I want to
innocence
hear about
Dolores
this.
Day and Harry's ex-girlfriend Dora are essential parts of the game's lore and high-stake theories. Both will be prominently featured in the last parts of this video. And yet, even though they are so important, encountering them in the game is completely optional. If you somehow get to the last part of the game without ever hearing of either of them, then your last dream in the Sea Fortress will not feature them at all. Instead, Inland Empire will be relieved about how
somehow you managed to dodge it all. The church, the window, and the bad book in the store. On the shelf. You made it. Across the Black Sea, unharmed.
Oh, wow.
Harry is bisexual. While internalizing the homosexual underground thought yields inconclusive results, there are other events in the game hinting at Harry's less than rock-solid heterosexuality. The first one is his oddly aroused behavior before the smoker, which we already covered. Then there's the mysterious pair of eyes, which has observed Harry for some time now and concludes that he might be
Curious? I bet you are. What else is new? Certainly not a surprise when it comes to you, nitwit gobbo-goos.
There are also some suspicious remarks by Harry's skills, such as when Pain Threshold mentions how it would be great
if you can find someone else, preferably a large man dressed in nothing but a towel, to thrash you while you're spread naked and helpless on a cool slab.
And most curiously, when the racist lorry driver assures you that he's not an
anal acrobat in the homo circus?
Harry seems to have some unique personal insights into the performances displayed in that circus.
Anal acrobats actually train using a series of stomach breathing exercises, not butt clenches. Not many people know that. But
Why
you
does
do.
Harry know that?
Go figure.
And lastly, when the book on the medicinal purposes of the Pale suggests naked Pale meditation, Harry is initially a little anxious about the nudity aspect of it. The book then suggests that he should just make Kim join him.
Your partner is even more repressed than you are. It would do you both a world of good to spend a little more time getting in touch with your bodies.
Since a book
Touch
can't
each
really
other.
talk or react to your insecurities, we have to assume that, just like with the skills, this is Harry's own mind and desire speaking. Now, obviously, none of these references are conclusive. The way I see it, the writers were deliberately playful here about a topic that is supposed to remain as ambiguous to us as it is to Harry.
I ship it. I ship them. I want the old man Yowie, okay? I want it. They're so fucking cute! I've been seeing art on my Twitter timeline of these two. They're so adorable. I love them.
Alternative voice actors. Before the Final Cut version of Disco Elysium, only some central characters were partly voiced.
Can't talk, pig! She's coming up strong! Throwing rocks!
And while the studio managed to hire some professional voice actors and singers, they also teamed up with a few known podcasters, such as the team of Chapo Trap House.
We have a right to work! Crazy motherfucker. Didn't think you had that fury in you.
Claudia was voiced by Dasha from the Red Scare Pod, who also once belonged to the same Millennial Left scene a long time ago.
First I have to ask, are you okay, sir?
The F-word pass. You might have noticed that every single time the F-word, as in the slur for gay man or half of Kuno's vocabulary, is used in the game, it is censored by a quick. That is all except one single time. When you acquire the piss jacket from the two punks and make Kim wear it, he says it uncensored and with full natural authority.
If you saw this branch out from under me while I've got piss written on my back, I'm afraid the RCM is going to have our asses for this.
I hope you can
Kim didn't
forgive
get
me for
bleeped?
manually recensoring it here. We are on YouTube after all. The Impossible Door. When you walk up the coast past the DeLorean Church, you will encounter an old military depot and a skill check to break open its door. It's a legendary interfacing check, but at the same time even tougher than that. Because even if you fully max out your interfacing skill or use cheats to give you every benefit possible, the door just won't budge. It's the only check in the game that simply cannot be won even with a perfect roll. Instead, when you inevitably lose the check, you gain a thought that urges you to reflect on the limits of your agency when confronted with an unbending universe and to use this opportunity to grow as a person.
Accept it. You cannot open all the doors. You have to integrate this into your character. Some doors will forever remain closed.
At the same time, I believe that in earlier stages of the game's development, the depot might have been intended as a shortcut to the island. The old washer lady tells us that it might have been once used as a supply tunnel to move ammunition across the bay to the sea fortress, and it would make sense since it does point directly to it. The deserter mentions such a tunnel system too.
There used to be a system that connected the bunkers, tunnels and such.
In the finished game, Lillian's fishing boat can only get you to the island a single time, marking a point of no return before the game's last chapter. So maybe the tunnel was once planned as a means to visit and leave the island more freely. But since they never implemented more than its entrance, they repurposed its door into a meta joke about the limits of the game.
That's fun.
Layer 2. The Snuff Murder Radio. The doomed commercial building once had a window repair shop that, together with every business except the novelty dice makers, vanished from the building. When we ask the dice maker what happened to it, she tells us that the business was actually a front for a studio that produced snuff radio shows.
The business was actually set up as a front for an illicit group that was producing snuff medias.
Guys, I'm actually so upset that she wasn't the killer, by the way. I really thought I had it figured out when I was playing the game that she was the one who shot. I was extremely wrong. I was extremely wrong. But you have to admit my theory was sound, okay? I had a pretty sound theory.
Except Rosa radio station that broadcasts real murders with real victims. Some people pay good money to get off on it.
What does she mean, to get off on it?
The show, it turns out, was targeted at an audience of people who were aroused by listening to live murders. The ravers have heard of the murder station too.
Probably jacked up to some snuff station too. It means like one of those rich boy private radio stations where you can listen to people getting killed on, then jerk off to it. Sick shit.
And if that wasn't enough, it turns out that we actually met a participant of these shows earlier in the game. When you get Kuno to trust you, he reveals to you that even he is terrified of Kuno-S, who is in many ways even more unhinged than him.
She's not crazy. She's insane. Dangerous. She smoked a man. That's right. She's a killer. Snuff radio shit. Believe me, pig, you don't want to know.
During this conversation, Shivers tells us that
there's something cold in the air, like water lapping against cold stones, or dripping in a hallway nearby. 3 years ago, there were shoes in the corner.
We know that the studio was located right next to the dice maker's workshop, and indeed, if we look into their shared hallway, we see an old pair of shoes lying in the corner. Lastly, the snuff show might be tied to Tiberius Hardy, the brother of Titus Hardy, and a window repairman. Him being in the window repair business is his only link to the murder radio though, so treat this as a matter of speculation. Cut ending number 1, the eject button ending. When you internalize the finger on the eject button thought, it seems to grant you a daily option to make your exit.
Looks like you thought about how much they'll miss you and the freedom of finality for too long. And now you've decided to actually yourself. The train leaves the station every evening. 2100. Make sure you have a gun and bullets.
And indeed, instead of giving you any stat bonuses, the thought just says that you now have the option to prematurely end your playthrough once a day. However, even if you have your gun and a bullet ready to go, nothing happens because the eject button ending was cut out of the game. The full procedure and its corresponding voice lines, however, can still be located in the game files.
Sounds like you're a potential suicide cop with his finger on the eject button, ready to let go of this life. It would be the honorable thing to do. It would really show them. Show her too.
And if you committed to it, the ending screen would have been titled
Cop finally himself.
Adding the finally is of course a little brutal. I guess it's supposed to show that Harry has been going on about it for quite.
Officer of the RCM ended his own life yesterday with a single shot. His death came as something that was a surprise to those who knew him, as he threatened to kill himself on many previous occasions. Yeah, there were many options throughout the game to kill yourself. The people who talk about killing themselves all the time aren't usually the ones that do it, said Officer Manat, friend and colleague. Job gets to people in different ways, said Officer Mac Torson, another colleague. Now they're going to start talking about improving counseling services for officers of the RCM again, but to be honest, I don't think counseling would have helped him. Harry was mentally ill, yeah.
Quite a while now. Cut ending number 2, the self-immolation ending. When you acquire the bottle of pure alcohol from Rosemary, transforming it into a Molotov cocktail is currently the only thing that we can do with it. But there was once an ending in the game that involved Harry lighting it on fire, gulping it down and burning to his death in the process.
Cop self-immolates in the streets of Martinez. A detective lieutenant of the RCM went up in flames yesterday after setting a bottle of 197.4 proof alcohol on fire and taking a drink. That's just like him to take his leave in a fit of theatricality while the rest of us have to clean up the mess, Satellite Officer Vic Mayer commented.
And again, they really had to do him like that. Cut ending number 3, Harry becomes an island hermit. The last cut ending would have been triggered when your morale hits 0 while interrogating the deserter. Harry would then give up his life as a cop to join him in a reclusive existence far from precincts and ex-wives.
Cop exchanges the uniform for the life of an island hermit. Another police officer resigned from the RCM. He now lives on a deserted island, living off raw fish and shouting, "I never loved that woman."
You will notice that none of the 3 cut endings show Harry in a particularly dignified light.
No. Never.
The Idiot's Doom Spiral. George, who goes by the nickname Idiot Doom Spiral, might be the most tragic character in the game. Not because of what he himself tells us about his demise, but because of what he can tell us. When you ask him how he, a once successful businessman, became an alcoholic bum, he will tell you a story that starts with him forgetting his keys on a jog. A small mishap then spirals out of control. He couldn't get into his apartment or to work, the police wouldn't help him, and his girlfriend ended up leaving him because he was homeless and jobless.
I was once a reasonably high net worth individual. My business buddies and I had our own creative services agency. I had a nice apartment, an even nicer piece of ass. But somehow it all got away from me.
When you bring up that there seem to be some steps missing in his doom spiral, he denies that there's anything more to it.
I've thought about this series of events for a long time. If there was anything else to it, I would have thought of it by now.
It quickly becomes apparent how the story that he tells you about his life just doesn't quite add up.
If it sounds like it makes no sense, that's because it doesn't.
After your initial talk, you can offer him to search for his beloved jacket that he, just like his keys, inexplicably lost somewhere. However, when you, the great detective that you are, find his jacket and bring it back to him, he doesn't greet you with gratitude but confusion. He doesn't remember his jacket, nor sending you to find it.
What the f*** are you talking about, Tequila?
It becomes abundantly clear to you how this man managed to lose his keys, business, friends, and girlfriend. I'm calling it. It's neurological.
Doom Spiral's lapses of memory don't just explain him forgetting his keys and jacket, but also the big gap between going on a jog and him drinking himself to death. He seems to suffer under some kind of neurological condition that can't be explained by plain alcoholism. But the tragedy of Idiot Doom Spiral is not just his condition. Rather, it's that any kind of psychiatric assistance, safety net or friend reaching out should have been able to put a brake on his doom spiral before it consumed his entire life. Memory lapses are not supposed to be a death sentence, and yet he ends up homeless in the snow, slowly undoing what little remains of him, drink by drink. Besides his condition, we get to know George as a man who is otherwise still sharp and an eloquent storyteller. He could have had a decent chance of survival if the world cared about him just a little.
Damn, so true.
Harry's primal scream. Harry is the only character in the game that is not voiced. The only time you hear him is when he's singing his heart out at karaoke, resulting in either the whiny screeching of the limbic system or the guttural growling of the ancient reptilian brain.
You are all alone.
Both are voiced by Mikey Goodman, but because of his incredible vocal range, both voices are so diametrically opposed that it's hard to pinpoint Harry's normal voice in between. There was, however, one single more time that we could hear Harry himself, and it was deleted from the game with the Final Cut version in 2021.
What?
Before then, when you tried to communicate with the spooky voice in the doomed commercial building's furnace, Harry would announce himself like this.
Something breaks loose in you. A mighty bellow echoes throughout the chimney's depths. The chatter of tiny voices above suddenly cease. Then, you've awakened the entity.
As it turns out,
I don't think the skills talking is his voice. That's just his skills. I don't know. Though I kind of like pictured it as his like his mind voice. You know when you're like talking to yourself in your brain. I kind of picture that as like his mind voice. So Maybe I kind of want a inner monologue. Thank you. I would sort of headcanon it as his voice, but I don't know.
Your primal scream did not reach any malign entities, but instead the novelty dice maker on the top floor. We will return to her in the very last layer of the iceberg to find out why she in particular is immune to the curse of the doomed commercial building.
Because she's the murderer!
Harry is Krasmazov's son. Harry could be the illegitimate son of Krasmazov, the late father of scientific communism and leading figure of Elysium's global communist revolution.
What are you, Krasmazov?
When Harry comes across the bust of Krasmazov in the room of Stepan the student communist, he will notice a certain similarity between Kras and himself. And who could deny it?
Well, you both do seem to share an affinity for sideburns. But it seems like old Kras here didn't drink nearly as much as you.
From that point on, you will be able to make remarks throughout your playthrough about how you might in fact be Krasmazov himself.
Look at yourself, Krasmazov. It has to be you. It all fits. Everything about it. The revolutionary heart beats within.
Kim, of course, plays the role of the buzzkill again and states how
Krasmazov looks Samaran, and you don't.
To which Harry can retort that actually he is part Samaran himself. This has led the game's fan community to believe that even though Harry can't be the dead Krasmazov, he could still be his illegitimate son. He certainly looks the part, and the timeline would make sense. Harry was born in 07, 1 year before Krasmazov died in 08. Additionally, Harry was raised by a single mother of Insulindian descent while having no recollections of his father, from whom he would have inherited his Samaran side. And lastly, Harry might have also inherited his extra physical abilities from his hypothetical late father, but more about that at a later point in the video.
Okay, you win. Be Krasmazov then. I don't care.
Old Man Romance.
Dude, I want to be the father of communism. Well, in my playthrough, I think I was a communist, right? Or I was a fascist. I was everything, to be honest. I did a little bit of everything. I think I was I'm pretty sure I had a little like thought about being a centrist. I don't know. I was trying to be a fascist though. I got to wear communist clothes at the end. I never saw that bust in my playthrough though, so I never got to be the father of communism or the son of the father of communism, whatever. Now this is what I'm looking for right here. Old Men Yaoi. I shipped these two, I'm not gonna lie.
The two petanque-playing retirees, René and Gaston, might be the most metaphorical duo of the city. The royalist on the one side and the friend of the Union on the other represent the city's past eras, monarchy and communism, as well as the current most popular outlooks of the town, right-wing reaction and left-wing nostalgia. René and Gaston have spent a major part of their life involved in a love triangle where they fought over a girl who ultimately remained undecided between the two. The channel Albatross makes the great point that this girl might have been a stand-in for the city itself. When you first meet the two old men, they're bickering like an old married couple. They seemingly hate each other, yet spend all day playing petanque together. On the 5th day of the game, René will die of heart failure. When we talk to Gaston afterwards, we find him heartbroken. If you ask him if he loved René, he will suppress his tears for a moment to tell you.
Yes, I love that angry prick. He didn't deserve it, but I did.
While we can easily interpret Gaston's love as platonic, that's less the case when we talk to René about Gaston before his death. When we succeed in a pain threshold check, which I think is a fitting skill for this, we gain insight into the inner life of the old monarchist.
He would sooner die than let it surface. There's tenderness in the Carabineer's look. Tenderness that's curdled into pain or something darker. Even worse, a love aborted and smothered, stamped beneath his brilliant boot heel. You catch the old Carabineer's gaze, slowly leaving his opponent's wrinkled face as his dark eyes meet yours. Whatever turmoil raged in him a moment ago is quelled for now. like the last rays of the evening sun, gently kissing the day goodbye, before giving way to unfathomable darkness. Wheeled back into the darkest unexplored depths of his mind, never meant to be shared, seen, or confronted. A true master of his emotions, hopelessly alone. Behind the unbreakable walls he spent a lifetime erecting. No one will ever know him.
René's feelings for Gaston were never compatible with the ideology that defined his entire life and that he never let go of, even after the death of the old regime. His emotional path mirrors that of Harry if he is to take the fascist route and become the stoic icebreaker in an attempt to render himself immune to heartbreak. In a way, René's and Gaston's dormant feelings for each other explain why the girl they both loved could never commit to one of them. Maybe she felt something about the two men that they could never admit to themselves. Montage lore. In 2023, Zaum released the game's collage mode that lets you play around with character models. Hidden in the montage backgrounds, however, were secret puzzle pieces that show you a glimpse of past and future events of Martinez if you put them together. There are 4 unlockable secret scenes in this new mode, each with a small piece of narration. The first depicts the fishing village being torched by the suzerain to suppress the Communard uprising. The second one shows us the eventual founding of the Commune of Ravachol. The third one is set in the near future, where Evrat's youth center is built on the bulldozed fishing village.
Damn.
The final scene is set 20 years after the events of Disco Elysium and depicts how the plaza has been turned into an abandoned advertising space, including a horse monument that has now been shittified into a minimalist corporate logo.
Martinez is a monument now, a characterless tableau to borderless sociopathy.
The relation of these scenes to the game's canon timeline, however, remains highly debatable, since they were created when many of the main writers of the original game already left the studio.
Dang.
Japan's 25th skill. Translations are difficult. Even within language families, you often can't convey the subtleties of the original text. This challenge, of course, becomes infinitely more difficult once you translate between languages as different as English and Japanese, especially for a game with over 1.4 million words. That's why Disco Elysium's Japanese lead translator Yosei Muto wanted to stay as close to the original text as possible without subjecting it to localizations. Localization here means adapting the original content to the cultural and linguistic norms of the country and language to which you translate it.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite.
Muto's solution was to introduce what he calls the 25th skill, which is a little text insert that pops up in your dialogue from time to time to give you insights into the meaning of the original text. It's supposed to work like a miniature encyclopedia skill. Old heads like me might also remember this practice from early anime fan subs. And since we're talking about Disco's translations, did you know that the game is unique in that it lets you switch between languages with the click of a button? It makes Disco Elysium into a great tool for learning new languages. Dedicated community members have even taken it one step further and made guides on how to add an automatic dictionary to the game, making Disco Elysium into a genuinely valuable resource for language learning.
That's so cool.
Autoerotic asphyxiation.
Maybe you're like a masochist.
When you have played Disco Elysium for a while, you will notice that Harry is, for lack of better words, a bit of a freak. Not only will you encounter numerous references to BDSM practices throughout the game, but especially if you go down the ultra-nationalist path, also a perplexing number of cuckoldry fantasies about foreigners.
They're getting pleasured by foreign men with superior testosterone levels. They'll wear you like a sock, Harry boy.
There is, however, one practice that keeps getting mentioned repeatedly, and since it takes 2 to tango, it also involves your good friend, the horrific necktie.
Yes, and perform autoerotic asphyxiation on yourself with your funny necktie, out in the open somewhere.
Autoerotic asphyxiation is the practice of strangling oneself for the purpose of sexual arousal.
Let me just tighten up a bit for you. Is that good? You sick wild boy.
This particular technique of self-stimulation is not just the leading cause of autoerotic fatalities, but in Harry's case involves a libidinal attachment to the idea of dying, or more concretely, hanging. In your conversation with the hanged man, which, since he is dead, is a dialogue with Harry's projection of himself, you can suggest that he was aroused by the act of getting strangled, to which he will ask,
"Do I look like an erotic auto-asphyxiation type to you?"
Harry's projections are not limited to the murder victim though. His old disco idol Guillaume Le Million is told to have died of a venereal disease, and yet Harry insists that he too was found hanging from a tree after an autoerotic asphyxiation accident. Between Harry gaining pleasure from strangulation and his necktie evoking associations of death,
The knot reminds you of a noose.
we can assume that Harry has connected a certain sexual excitement to the idea of hurting, if not ending himself. By the way, when I researched the topic, I found out that this connection exists on a historical level too. Asphyxiation might have been first used as a treatment for erectile dysfunction after we observed how publicly executed men developed an erection while being hanged. Anyway, subscribe to the channel for more.
What a fucking fact they just threw in there. Maybe Measurehead needs to get strangled. It might help with his erectile dysfunction. Doesn't have to be a part of this semen retention society any longer. Get those superior race genes out there, boy. That was a wild little fact they just
Exciting
decided to throw in there.
autoerotic asphyxiation facts.
Yeah, that was a
Truth
great
with
fact.
the furries. Up until 2018, Disco Elysium was supposed to release under the name No Truce with the Furies. Lead designer Robert Kurwitz recently revealed the reason for changing the name last second before release.
Sellepärast, et selle mängu nimi alguses oli No Truce with the Furies, mis näeb välja nagu No Truce with the Furries. Et inimestel oli mingi furry nali selle kohta.
It turned out that, in a very predictable turn of events, people online were already making fun of the name and mispronounced it as No Truth with the Furries. The old title, however, survived in several ways. If you decide to work with the Ravers to create a nightclub in the old DeLorean church, you can name the club after the game's old name.
No truce!
It's settled then. Everyone welcome to No Truce with the Furies.
The poem from R.S. Thomas that inspired the old title is also still shown at the start of the game. The poem with the fitting name Reflections revolves around struggles of identity and self-hatred, motives that are all too central to Disco Elysium. The first lines of the poem return in the game when Kim asks you to suggest a name for the murder case. You can propose naming it The Furies Are at Home in the Mirror, but Kim the old buzzkill is not having it.
Furies? Yes, well, I don't know. I have to be honest, I'm not experiencing the internal strife that refers to. And also, could you make it less poetic somehow?
But then, in one of my favorite twists of the game, you can walk into Kim's room after the tribunal to see in his notes that he took your suggestion too hard after all.
The Furies are at home in the mirror.
That's
He
cute.
went with the Furies. Perhaps the internal strife it implies was not so off after all. Or perhaps to honor your wishes, or for some other reason. Hard to say.
I do like a Disco Elysium
Anthroponetics.
as the title.
Anthroponetics refers to the study of the Pale, the mysterious phenomenon that covers 70% of the known surface of Elysium. I have divided 3 approaches to it into different levels, each assigned to successively deeper layers of the iceberg. The exact logic of the Pale was explicitly left a mystery by the writers, just like it's still a mystery to the inhabitants of Elysium. But there are enough hints and clues in the game that we can compile to arrive at a sufficient notion of it. So while none of the theories have a claim to absolute truth, they all manage to explain certain supernatural and Pale-related phenomena in the game. But in order to get into the advanced theories of the Pale, I want to give a quick overview over how the game first presents it to us. Because our first introduction to the Pale is a rather abstract one. Joyce tells us that the Pale is
something whose fundamental property is the suspension of properties. Physical, epistemological, linguistic. It is the transition state of being into nothingness.
This void of Pale is what lies between the few livable areas of Elysium, which are coined isolas for how they appear to be islands in a vast sea of Pale. When we ask the Pale driver about it, someone who has spent a good part of her life trucking in between the isolas, we learn that the Pale contains scattered shreds of memories, dreams and experiences from all of Elysium's inhabitants, and that these fragments irradiate your mind if you travel through them for too long.
They are someone's memories, boy. What difference does it make if it's me or not?
So now the programmer confirms this too.
Pale is a shroud of memories, and it doesn't really distinguish to whom those memories belong to.
The dissolution of identities is an entropic effect of the Pale. Entropy is a concept in physics that refers to the disorder or randomness in a given system. Anthroponetics borrows its name from it because the Pale is the entropy of Elysium. It's the loss of spatial, temporal and personal identity, the disintegration of a cohesive reality into its disjointed elements.
Items, people, even words will tumble. All will lose its meaning in the coming years.
Maximal entropy also describes the equilibrium condition that a system settles into when left alone. The game refers to the state when it describes how a fully pale-covered world would be.
One with the state of the world before reality began.
The rest state of humanity.
The last basic attribute of the Pale is that it's growing in size.
One of the few measurable effects of the Pale is that it is expanding at an unknown rate.
The global increase in Pale is no mere theory, but confirmed in the book Sacred and Terrible Air, which is written by Discus lead writer Robert Kurwitz. The book too is set in the very same world of Elysium 21 years after the events of the game. During its story, the Pale is taking massive stretches of land in all of Elysium. But we will return to the book at a later time, because now...
Dude, I really want to read the book, but it's like... I don't even remember what language it's in. Like Estonian or Latvian or something like that. And I don't know if there's a translation out there or not for it.
Now that we got a few basics out of the way, we can proceed to our first anthroponetic theory. Anthroponetics Level 1, the Magpie Theory of the Pale. At the end of the game, we learn that the Pale is by no means a natural phenomenon, but a byproduct of human civilization, or, more concretely, of human consciousness.
The Pale too came with you. No one remembers it before you. There is an almost unanimous agreement between the birds and the plants that you are going to destroy us all. It is a nervous shadow cast into the world by you, eating away at reality. A great, unnatural territory. Its advent coincides with the arrival of the human mind. Give me enough time, you will wipe us all out and replace us with nothing. We suspect it will be something like the oxygen holocaust that wiped out anaerobic life 2.6 billion years ago, when organisms first started breathing, only much worse.
This corresponds to a theory of the Pale that was popularized through concept art commissioned by Zaun. It suggests that the Pale is brought into being by individuals known as magpies, humans that are sensitive to a cryptic stream of information radiating from the future. When ideas are extracted from this future and are manifested as novelties, be they of technological, artistic, ideological or a different quality, it creates something that does not belong into the current world just yet. The Pale then is the manifestation of a stream of future that was preemptively realized and thus void and dead upon its arrival in Elysium's reality. This is why Noid and the Crabman call the DeLorean Church a sarcophagus built around something dead, because the Pale hole in the church is dead nothingness spilled into their timeline. The Pale can thus be understood as the counterbalancing force of Elysium, a void compensating for the things that are not supposed to be there yet. It's the negative equivalent to everything that humanity has prematurely appropriated from its future. It is, after all, against the laws of reality to just produce something out of nothing. That is why these somethings are accompanied by the nothingness of the Pale. Harry too might be a so-called magpie. After all, his skills regularly tell him about events that will happen later in the game or even 20 years later in Sacred and Terrible Air. And speaking about the book, it features a paranormal investigator who obtains his information by, quote, reading the Pale like a magnetic reader. It's a phrase that Trant borrows to describe Harry's detective skills.
As a police detective, he's like a magnetic reader on the world team.
And while the Magpie theory was never canonized, I think it is able to explain too much of the game to be discarded. For example, when we find Van Eyck's discarded tape that contained revolutionary music for his time, our thought cabinet speculates on why he might have thrown it away.
But why? Did he think it was retrograde? It wasn't. Perhaps he caught a glimpse of the future and did not want for it to arrive just yet.
Van Eyck seems to have received his music from a future that he knew was not supposed to enter his present yet. Another hunch about the Pale mechanisms proposed by the Magpie theory seems to have devolved into a racist conspiracy theory as presented by Gary.
The future. The Sealites are helping themselves from the future, and every little incremental improvement they receive in the present has major ripples all along the timeline by smuggling ever more advanced tech down to the past. I'm sure you can see where this is heading.
My third case for the magpie theory is the existence of innocences, the personifications of Elysium's world spirit. They are said to function very similarly to magpies, albeit at a greater scale.
An innocence is infallible. The decisions made by one are not decisions. They are inevitabilities. What would have happened anyway? Only accelerated, packed into decades instead of centuries.
Innocences, just like magpies, are agents of accelerated novelty and violate the organic flow of time. In the case of her innocence Dolores Day, it is even suggested that the inventions she brought were dangerous because she forced them into being prematurely.
We were supposed to come up with this ourselves. The man was reported to have screamed at the innocence.
Lastly, the moral intern's understanding of Pale mechanics seems to correspond to the magpie theory of the Pale. Elysium's largest political institution follows a philosophy of slow progress and is heavily invested in suppressing novelty and controlling the spread of Pale. After all,
the moral intern is responsible for ensuring the continuance and flourishing of mankind for the next 3,000 years. The planning division must account for a great many possible outcomes and chance events.
to navigate into a future so far ahead and to make sure that Elysium survives on the way, the moral intern has specialized in the creation of so-called contingency spreads. These are datasheets that map all future timelines that are possible from the standpoint of the present.
When we speak of contingency spreads, we are talking about the most fantastically complex data visualization human beings are capable of producing, with thousands of events, from elections and wars to natural disaster or scientific miracles, and millions of possible outcomes. You might also imagine these spreads as a kind of tree, with every juncture representing a different event, and every branch representing a different timeline. No one can know the future. But with contingency spreads, it is possible to predict what the future realities might reasonably look like.
With this data, the moral intern can detect deviations that occur against their predictions. Magpie activities would introduce impossible timelines, urging the coalition to contain its source to minimize the spread of Pale. The theory that Harry himself is a magpie seems to be supported by how the coalition disappears him if he decides to report before the committee about his experience with Martinez's anthroponetic anomaly.
Weeks later, no answers about extracted cop. Early reports that the lieutenant was investigating anthroponetic phenomena along the coast have not been confirmed.
That was a lot about the Pale. Oh my god. I didn't realize that at least the theory behind the Pale is that it's like resulting from human consciousness. That's a cool take because it's kind of like how humans are, creating like global warming, like CO2 emissions and stuff. It's like CO2 emissions, but it's brain juice. Consciousness creating this nothingness that's fucking expanding, which is kind of scary. But again, that's like how the oceans are expanding because the icebergs are melting. I see the similarities going on here.
Extra Physics Part 1: Inframaterialism. If magpies exist, their capabilities would be classified as extra physics, a concept that, in Elysium, accounts for what other fantasy worlds might call magic. Inframaterialism, too, is a branch of extra physics. It's an obscure school of Masovian theory that insists on how,
under certain exceptional circumstances, the proletariat's embrace of historical materialism may be so fervent that their beliefs take form in the world of matter as a kind of revolutionary plasm.
Depending on a collective's belief in communism, this plasm is said to influence material reality and transcend its natural laws. Its effects are supposed to range from increased agricultural yields and architectural stability to strengthened beard growth and sexual vigor.
Hyperproductive vegetables and ultra-horny communards.
The commune of Ravachol once attempted to harness the power of revolutionary plasm for military purposes to crush invading coalition airships with their collective will. Unfortunately, they were instantly vaporized by airstrikes.
Picture the lot of them, all standing with their fingers in the air 1 minute, the next reduced to a bloody mist.
But inframaterialism doesn't just play the role of a refuted pseudoscience. At the end of the communist questline, Harry attempts to channel his own plasm and help the students build their Matchbox tower, whose structural design has absolutely no business staying up for long. And yet, if you collected more than 20 communist points in your playthrough, the tower will remain stable for just a little longer than it physically should.
There, in the middle of the floor, the winding spire quivers with an improbable energy.
This is impossible, right? There's no way it's really staying up like that.
Sacred and Terrible Air features another case of inframaterialism at work, this time not against bourgeois physics but against the ultimate antagonistic force of Elysium, the Pale. When the spectre of the deceased communist Ignus Nielsen holds an enthusiastic speech about communism in the midst of the deepest Pale, the Pale around him recedes just for a moment. Back in the game, Steban confirms that the inframaterialists have speculated about such an interaction.
Those same theorists have hypothesized that revolution may in fact create a counterforce that prevents the Pale from expanding.
There might be reasons to believe, though, that this effect is not necessarily achieved by the belief in the political economic system of communism in particular, but rather through a more abstract faith in the future of humanity. Such a belief would, after all, go against everything that the Pale symbolizes.
Many inframaterialists believe that Pale is actually a manifestation of nostalgia and historical inertia.
Consequently, the Pale would be counteracted by the belief in a notion of communism that, at its core,
replaces faith in the divine with faith in humanity's future.
The very will to live and to build a better future is conceptually opposed to the entropic death drive that corrodes Elysium into the Pale. This kind of primordial hope that repels the Pale can take the form of revolutionary fervor, but seems to be accessible through other means too. But more about that in the next layer, because to conclude our initial overview of extraphysics, we first need to talk about Extraphysics Part 2, the Weiss-Wiesemann coefficient. If you win the rhetoric check in the harbor to get inside the cargo container, you will be welcomed by no other than the mega-rich lightbending guy.
Ahoy! Come on in!
You can't be serious.
As it turns out, the reason why the light bends around him is something called the
Weiss-Wiesemann coefficient.
The Weiss-Wiesemann coefficient is a ratio designed to reflect the difference in net worth between individuals. When the coefficient is close to 1, or 100%, it means one person possesses all the net worth. Among that group of individuals, it's been observed that when the Weiss-Wiesemann coefficient reaches about 0.96 or so, the laws of physics begin to bend around the high net worth individual.
And since the mega-rich guy's net worth is infinitely higher than Harry's, you cannot perceive him directly nor hear his voice undistorted.
In essence, it says that when an extremely low net worth individual meets an extremely high net worth individual, some of the laws of physics cease to apply.
The reason for the distortion is not a subjective hallucination on Harry's side. Rather, it's the visual manifestation of their objective social relation in terms of wealth inequality. Just like the inframaterialist's plasm, the Weiss-Wiesemann coefficient too affects the very laws of nature. And if you encounter the mega-rich lightbending guy before meeting the student communists, you can share your observations with them.
But if it's true that this individual possesses so much capital that light literally bends around him, then that must mean that capital in sufficient quantities must exhibit its own plasm-like qualities.
What capital and revolutionary optimism have in common is that they both project themselves into the future. Capital too is temporally mediated after all, its value that is set in motion in hopes of a future return on investment. In an ironic way, Elysium's communists and capitalists are jointly opposed to the temporal dimension of moralism, which attempts to stop time, and fascism, which attempts to turn back time. Maybe it's this inherent optimism towards the future that lends the unexpected duo their shared extraphysical abilities.
Dude is so rich he has like a gravitational pull. And it's just, or it's like a black hole, I guess. It's more like a black hole. Because black holes, like, suck light into them. I guess it's different from light bending. This almost make me think, like, being so wealthy is like, it's increasing your, like, mass. And thus you have, like, a gravitational pull that's bending light. But I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. I don't know.
Layer 3. The Coke Skull and the DLC truck. One of Idiot Doomspiral's famed stories revolves around a legendary Martinez designer who had more than a bit of a drug habit.
You've got to understand, the work this guy was doing was so high concept that regular amounts of cocaine just weren't cutting it. By the end, they were bringing it in by the lorry load.
When the famous designer inevitably succumbed to his lifestyle, his cause of death left a mark on his corpse, or rather, in it.
Supposedly, when they performed the autopsy, the coroner discovered nearly a quarter-kilo of coke jammed into his nasal cavity.
That's almost certainly anatomically impossible.
That's a lot
Wrong
of coke.
Again, nerd. Where there's a will, there's a way.
There are those who believe the designer was buried with this quarter key of nose candy still lodged in his sinuses. That's what those expeditions are looking for.
The cocaine skull.
The cocaine skull.
This mythical artifact seems to be located somewhere under Martinez, where expeditions have been trying to find it for years.
They buried him here, too. Perhaps right under Ab's pipe there, or in some yard in Martinez proper. A hidden mausoleum.
While no one really knows if the skull is in the sewers or the subterranean mausoleum, everyone seems to agree that to start the expedition you would first need to enter Martinez's underground area. But when we signal to Doomspiral that we are ready to start our epic journey for the Coke Skull, he stops us in our tracks.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on just a minute. Finding it right now is literally impossible. For one, the way is blocked by that big lorry that says Delta Logistics Company on the side. You definitely have to search the area behind that lorry too, yet it is impassable.
And indeed, if we walk to the eastern edge of the playable map, there's a big electro carriage blocking the gate. Maybe you've already noticed it, but it is no coincidence that the Delta Logistics Company truck spells DLC. And right next to it, as if to confirm the existence of an underground area, is a sewer cover leaking a strangely comforting smell. This is a throwback to when Harry regularly ventured down the Martinez sewers decades ago as a little kid.
Below the old mines, Revachel's underground cemetery. Le Petit Rat braved the underground passageways, trying to get to Le Royaume, where the Philippian kings were interred. Mausoleums, burial chambers, fabled relics.
Of course, a simple truck standing in the way would not realistically prevent anyone from accessing the game's DLC area, since you could just climb over the fence. That is why Doomspiral is quick to mention a second, more compelling obstacle.
And second, outfitting an expedition like that is expensive. It'd have to be a big production to do the Cocaine Skull justice. You need new gear, people who know what they're doing, all kinds of provisions. It's just not feasible within the economic and temporal frame of our current setup. Matter of fact, unless a bunch of money just falls out of the sky, we might never know what's up with that skull.
That's literally just them saying that, like, maybe in the future it'll be DLC, but obviously this game's been out for a while, and I think the producers no longer work with a company or something, so the DLC is never coming. We'll never know about the Cocaine Skull.
This is of course Doomspiral breaking the fourth wall. When Disco Elysium released, the team simply didn't have enough money and time to add another huge area to the game, so they postponed it into a DLC. This wouldn't be the first time that the game references its studio's financial limitations. At the Feld building, for example, we are told that it's just too expensive to animate Harry climbing a ladder.
Yes, climbing it would be too expensive. The animations your body needs to make interacting with the ladder are beyond your capabilities at this moment in your career.
The underground area, however, was probably once intended to be a part of the release version, since the game was supposed to feature a plethora of underground areas according to an old dev blog. Besides the Coke Skull, the game suggests two other possible objectives of the DLC's underground expedition. The first one would be the Royal Catacombs, the last resting place of, among others, Philippe II, whose statue we find in the town center. He seems to be connected to the Coke Skull through a similar substance habit.
He was also a prodigious snorter of nose candy. Not just any nose candy though. We're talking Royal Philippian Blow, allegedly twice as potent as the stuff you find nowadays, and purple. Philippian cocaine was purple.
Shivers mentions that his mausoleum is supposed to contain untold quantities of the purple powder, the same that we might find in the sinuses of the designer's skull too. The last object of the DLC's planned underground expedition would have been a mythical artifact of more significance than the Coke Skull. When Tran tells us that the Commune destroyed all 3 failed tape computer prototypes, Shivers adds,
Or was there a 4th prototype that remains hidden in the mausoleums below Coal City?
Coal City fittingly lies directly to the east, right behind the DLC truck.
You feel you're just west of Coal City.
We will get into the importance of the failed prototypes later though. There is a good reason to save them for the very last part of this video.
That's so sad that we didn't get the DLC. That's very sad. I want to find the cocaine skull.
Harry erased his memories. While the player is initially led to assume that Harry owes his amnesia to a legendary bender, the truth behind his lost memories turns out to be connected to the mysteries of the city itself. Throughout the game, we notice that Harry knows too much. Apart from regaining a few of his own memories, his skills provide him with random pieces of knowledge that he has no business knowing. He gains visions of the city's future and even communicates with the spirit of the city itself.
I am la Rebachelière. I am the city. I am a fragment of the world's spirit, the genius Loki of Revachol.
At several points in the game, Harry speculates that his memory loss
Dude, I was wondering what the female voice was from Shivers. Like, Shivers would randomly have this, like, female voice.
Might be connected to the Pale Hole in the old DeLorean church.
Harry, what do you think happened to you?
And while Jean discards this as a crackpot theory, it seems to be what actually happened. Memory loss is a main motive in Sacred and Terrible Air too. The book hints at the existence of a Pale Superdeep, an anomaly in the depth of the Pale that not only erases whatever crosses through it, but deletes every memory of it from the world. Back in Disco Elysium, the Pale driver mentions such a Superdeep too.
They say there is a point, one that I have not crossed, in the Pale Superdeep, where every step you take is one step further from home, no matter the direction. It's a point you cannot come back from. Your mind becomes so radiant with the past, there is a flip. Instead of writing, it erases memory, nearing some kind of indescribable finale. Maybe you've been down the motorway south?
And indeed, maybe he was. The 2mm Pale Hole seems to be exactly that, a condensed Pale Superdeep, a nucleus from which the Pale will spread. And just like all frequencies are told to cease in the Pale Superdeep, the anomaly in the church too shrouds you in absolute silence when you stand under it. We also know that it was the Pale anomaly that absorbed the data from the businesses of the doomed commercial building, causing most of them to declare bankruptcy. So maybe Harry received his impossible knowledge of the city by partaking in what information the Pale anomaly absorbed from it, all while having his own memories swallowed by the Pale Hole in the process. This would be the anthroponetical explanation of how he is connected to the city spirit through Shivers, and it explains his disjointed, seemingly random insights that he gains about his environment throughout the game. Tran's remark about Harry fits into this too.
As a police detective, he's like a magnetic reader on the world tape. Harry's been pushed flat against it. Total input.
He implies that Harry's reading of the world is not merely observational, but that it has a certain immediacy to it, as if he encountered it directly. There is reason to believe that Harry's fateful encounter with the 2mm Pale Hole was not an accident either. When you try to form a theory on the Pale Hole, logic states that
you don't have to. You already have. A long time ago. You have an explanation for all this. The person you were knows.
You can also share with Kim and Sona that you have researched the matter of Pale Holes before.
An amateur anthroponetic police officer. I'd like to say I've heard stranger things, but I'm not sure.
And lastly, Inland Empire implies that your condition might mirror that of the Pale-worshipping Crabman.
The Crabman? From what I've heard, his state could be reminiscent of Pale overexposure. Time perception-related illnesses, memory malfunctions, thought insertion.
And then there is you, and what happened to your mind. Are you not a Seraph in worship too?
And as to why Harry would decide to microwave his head in the Pale Hole, I think the simple truth is that Harry was a terribly depressed and heartbroken man before the events of the game, someone who regularly attempted and failed to kill his memory with alcohol before he decided to step up his game and bring out the big guns. In the game, Harry faints from simply finding an old letter from his ex even after losing all memory of her.
Yeah.
It's understandable why he wanted to delete it altogether. The Church Raid. Harry's acquaintance with the church and its pale anomaly precedes the game's events by not just a few days. It seems that he was engaged in a joint police operation in the church before the murder case.
There was a police raid a while back. I heard the place was shot to pieces. Your station was involved, I hear.
The Crabman semi-confirms the incident too,
Something like that.
but has lost most memory of it to the Pale. At the end of the game, however, we can ask Jean if by any chance we shot up a church lately.
So he remembers that. Yes, there may have been a raid on some churches.
Yeah, I agree. Harry is like genuinely a broken person. Like him separating from his fiance literally just like broke him beyond repair almost, like, which is like so real, right? Like there are people who deal with that kind of grief in real life in the same way. Like they drink and do drugs and just try to forget. So if Harry had the opportunity to forget by microwaving his head in the pail, he would probably take it. I agree.
It wasn't good press.
Shooting up churches never is.
Our enemies were hiding in a church, to the best of our information. That's it. I'm not talking about this anymore. Your security clearance is shit tier right now. You have to wait for it to go up.
We learned from Jean that there were raids not on one, but several churches. This corresponds to how all 7 Dolorian churches in Revachol are implied to contain pale anomalies.
There were 7 Pinewood churches built in the first decade of Revachol settlement.
We also learned that the operation was secret enough to withhold details from anyone outside the inner circle, and that the targets of the raids were the enemies of the RCM and, by extension, of the Moral Intern. My theory here is that since the Moral Intern is engaged in pale suppression, their designated enemies might have been working towards the opposite goal, to release the dormant anthroponetic catastrophe that lies suppressed in the churches. Perhaps they are religiously devoted to the pale like the Crabman and want it to spread. There is, after all, an ideology for that.
There is a name for this ideology. Intripalism. A faith in and desire to accelerate the spread of pale across the world until humanity has reached what its adherents call the rest state of humanity.
The church raid might have also initiated Harry's plan to erase his memories. If Harry first came into contact with the Pale Hole during the raid, it would have happened under the towering mosaic of Dolores Day, who Harry's mind associates with his ex-girlfriend Dora and the memories of her that he wants to abandon. When Harry asks himself what shattered her mosaic, logic suggests
something during the raid the lieutenant mentioned. A gunshot.
So who knows, maybe Harry himself fired at the mirror to shatter both it and everything he associates with it. It would have been a fitting metaphor for his desire to delete his memory of Dora, for which he would then use the Pale Hole that is conveniently housed right next to her. The pigs inherited Harry's memories. If you have been a good boy to the Union, Ivrat Claire will let you in on the location of your gun. But as soon as you arrive at the designated spot, you will face your gun pointed at you in the hands of Marianne Leplante or the pigs.
This is the pigs. Show me your hands. Back up! Back up! Status unconfirmed!
Yeah, back her up. Right up against those boxes and do some sex healing.
As it turns out, the poor lady suffers under some kind of identity disorder and thinks that she is a policewoman. While the game suggests that this is the result of loneliness, mental illness and police radio shows, there seems to be something stranger at work. We know that the effects of the Pale Hole are not limited to the DeLorean
Lamb, that was me too. I don't like that thought.
Church, but are already spreading and have bankrupted at least a dozen local businesses. And its effects on humans include
memory malfunctions, thought insertion.
The last one, thought insertion, might be relevant here. What if the Pale Hole did not just absorb Harry's memories, but gave them to Marianne, who was at that point already a husk of her former self, and thus a welcoming vessel for Harry's old identity? After all, she was drawn to Harry's personal gun, carries Harry's old head with her, and even managed to find a badge from Harry's precinct. Her mind could have received Harry's memories in the same way that Harry received his insights into the spirit of the city. And since we are talking about the Pale and memory malfunctions, I also had to think back to Idiot Doomspiral. I'm not sure where George hung out before he became Idiot Doomspiral, but if he too was in the vicinity of the church, then maybe his memories got zapped just like the data of the commercial building's businesses. It is, after all, highly unusual for a somewhat young and bright man to suddenly suffer under severe memory losses. And after all, we do have information about workers in the Doom commercial building suffering from similar memory disorders due to Pale interference.
Ever since I came to work here, it's been different. As if my mind's been wiped clean. It's so nice to be able to finally forget.
The Ravers nightclub will save Ravachol for a bit. Sonas and the Ravers' theory is that the DeLorean churches were once built to restrain the Pale anomalies within them.
Of course! A pine wood sarcophagus, or a containment facility of some kind, built by the first settlers.
The Ubies built this place about 320 years ago as a sarcophagus, encasement, confinement, of something they were afraid of.
When we let the Ravers build their sacrilegious anodic music club in this place of worship, Sona and Noid again agree with each other, this time on how the club might just be what the church and Ravachol needed.
Anodic music will definitely contain whatever we're dealing with.
Maybe a club for anodic music isn't the worst thing you can erect around this particular point in space.
This is an high-quality carcass. The power of anodic beats and hard bass is needed to reanimate it.
The reason why a music club might in fact not be the worst thing to build in the church is twofold. First, there's the technical side on how anodic music interacts with the Pale. Over 8,000 years ago, the first innocents Pericarnassus gifted humanity anthroponetics and taught them how to cross the Pale. In modern times, Pale travel is enabled by anodic frequency transmitters that force dimensions on the Pale by sending radio waves from one end of the path to the other. It shortens the journey and eases the effects of the Pale on the traveler's mind. We can assume that the anodic music of the club has the same effect on the Pale hole. It might deter its growth and even shield the residents of Martinez from its radiation. This theory is once again supported by Sacred and Terrible Air, which features an anodic music enthusiast called Ulf. When the Pale encroaches on his house, it hesitates for a moment and only takes us home once his music stops. The less technical reason why the club saves Ravachol is that it embodies a piece of Pericarnassian philosophy.
The Pericarnassian church is about love! Anodic music is about love! Unity! Unity!
What I said before about the abstract idea of communism and Disco Elysium applies here too. Both philosophies, the political optimism of the inframaterialists and the Pericarnassian love, project hope into the future and solidarity into the present. They both create a contrast to the managed decline that dominates Ravachol's political climate as well as the minds of its residents. The similarity is no coincidence either, since it's not just the Ravers who invoke the first innocents Pericarnassus.
The theorist Buncher and Watman, not inframaterialists, but theorists nonetheless, say that communism is a secular version of Pericarnassian theology, that it replaces faith in the divine with faith in humanity's future.
Love, solidarity, hope, and faith into humanity's future, regardless of whether it is manifested in politics or art like music, seem to be Elysium's foremost weapons against the Pale.
That's so interesting. So they can repress the Pale by thinking about the future or being optimistic about the future, and apparently political ideology can do it. Fucking art can do it. What else could? I feel like something about having children, right? Because children are often considered the future.
Trant is a moral intern spy. When we first meet Trant Heidelstamm on the boardwalk before the Feld building, we get the impression of a friendly and educated man who is showing his son the sights. It really is a nice change of pace to finally meet someone who appears so, for lack of better words, normal. After meeting all kinds of suspicious weirdos, drunks and political extremists, he seems to be one of those European upper-middle-class tourists that you meet in all corners of our real world. Soon, however, this very normalcy becomes suspicious itself. What does a moderately wealthy and well-traveled guy do in the poverty-ridden dump that is Martinez? A part of that mystery is resolved at the end of the game when he reappears as the, quote, civilian special consultant of our police precinct.
Special Consultant Trant Heidelstam.
At that point, we can already assess that, despite his otherwise talkative nature, he seems to be a very good liar who had no reservations at all about concealing his identity to you before. When you ask what Trant is doing on the team, Jong will tell you that
he's here to see if you're insane.
To which Trant will specify,
I was asked to share my take on some of the more obscure theories developed in Königstein in the 30s, like partial psychotraumatic amnesia, group personality theory. I was asked to participate as an expert. I'm at best an enthusiast in cognitive science. My background is in something else entirely. I engage in neurology on a merely theoretical level.
My first thought was that if the precinct really needed to assess one of their policemen's mental state, a run-of-the-mill psychiatrist would have done the job. But not only is Trant no ordinary doctor or psychiatrist, but when we inquire about his specialization, he immediately tries to evade the question.
In fact, I should probably get going.
Which is quite interesting, considering that we are dealing with a man who is usually talking our ear off when we ask him about literally anything else.
Yeah.
But before we dive into his specialization in fringe theoretical neurology, let's catch up on what makes him a likely candidate for a spy. In the Moral Intern questline, Trant is our go-to moralist. When you ask him about the Moral Intern and the Coalition, he seems to be incredibly educated about the bureaucratic intricacies of both. The Moral Intern is, as a reminder, the largest political entity in the world of Elysium. It is strongly allied with the Coalition of Nations, the military alliance that violently struck down the commune of Revachol, indiscriminately killing tens of millions in the process. These days they're engaged in keeping Revachol under colonial surveillance to make sure that no uprising ever happens again. Trant is quite fascinated by the Coalition's strategies to establish control over Revachol's populace.
That's exactly what the Coalition intends. You see, they would prefer that most people in Revachol don't think of themselves as living under a military occupation. That's why they generally prefer to keep their warships at a discreet distance from major population centers. That is certainly how the Coalition intends for it to be seen. You know, I once read a very interesting paper from Messina on the psychology of air-based artillery. Apparently, its presence stimulates the exact same part of the neural cortex that more primitive cultures associate with divine judgment. Isn't that fascinating?
Trant's incessant rants about the Coalition's military and bureaucratic structures only stop abruptly once you emphatically ask him about what the Coalition really is. What follows is a moment of silence about which you notice how
the man smiles at you for a long moment. He is doing his best not to show it, but the smile is ever so slightly more forced than before.
Then, for the first time in your conversation, Trant stops his monologue and seems to have arrived at the boundaries of what he is allowed to share with you.
Officer, we've only recently met. It would require a more thorough conversation than we have time for to answer a question like that.
Besides his uncertain ties with the Moral Intern and Coalition, Trant's biography too is all over the place and perpetually suspicious, as he seems to naturally come around important places with important people. Somehow his job also involved traveling through the Pale to meet the head of police of Königstein. Then, for some reason, he was again a so-called special consultant, but this time for an art exhibition at the Wompty Dumpty Dom Center, again on an entirely different Isola.
Wait. Did he just say Wompty Dumpty Dom Center? Like it's the most natural thing in the world.
The art market around the center is said to be a hotspot for large-scale tax evasion, which is of course something that a Moral Intern official might be interested in. Lastly, it seems that even your precinct's boss, Captain Price, thinks that there's something off about Trant. He is the only person who the captain explicitly excludes from his list of trusted precinct members.
Heidelstam. No.
So, to sum up our suspicions, why exactly would a well-educated man who is suspiciously wealthy and widely qualified, with plenty other career paths to choose from, and who specializes in esoteric neurology, decide to be a part-time consultant for a decrepit and underfunded police department whose captain doesn't even trust him? On the one hand, we have the generic accusation that he is a spy sent by the Moral Intern to keep tabs on the precinct and report any irregular activities. This mission would of course be warranted since Captain Price actually seems to be planning some kind of revolution as revealed in the game's final esprit de corps check. Maybe the Moral Intern caught wind of his plans and decided to have a closer look at everyone who might be involved. A more specific explanation for Trant's suspicious behavior would highlight his specialization in fringe neurological theories. Just like the Coalition warship seems to have an interest in both Pale-related phenomena and the people that are connected to them, Trant might have a similar assignment. Perhaps Martinez showed up as an anomaly in the Coalition's contingency spreads and he is to observe the situation. Or maybe Harry himself is the object of their interest since he has gained extra physical abilities that left a mark on the city and its stochastic makeup, thus showing up on the Coalition's radar. And after all, you do suspect that Trant was looking for you in particular.
Him being there with his son, it was not a coincidence. It's difficult to see, but he was worried about you. And also interested in the Feld building.
At the end of this video, we will even discover a reason why Trant might be interested in Harry and the Feld building in this specific combination. But again, you have to trust me when I say that this is best discussed in the very last layer of the iceberg. The horrific necktie is Harry speaking. Or, more specifically, every time we hear the horrific necktie, it's actually Harry talking to himself and everyone around him can hear it. The role of your necktie is to act like an in-game companion, except that it's mostly just encouraging you to party and abuse every substance you come across.
Live a little! You should get shit-faced on this damn crime scene! Oh yeah, baby! F this place up!
There are reasons, however, to assume that the necktie is not just a voice inside of Harry's head, but that it has always been Harry himself talking. The first clue is the voice actor. Your funny necktie is voiced by Mikey Goodman, who also sings Harry's attempts at karaoke. Secondly, when we transform the tie into a Molotov cocktail, it says that the two of you are basically the same person.
You and I are like the same person!
Then, when we finally admit to Kim that we have been talking to our necktie, he says,
Right, okay. Anyway, I'm glad you told me your necktie has been speaking to you. That must not have been easy.
For a second, it says it looks like he's about to add something. Maybe he intended to inform you that you're not just silently listening to your necktie. He decides to remain silent though, and I wouldn't blame him for not wanting to stir the pot of what remains at least a somewhat functional nutcase. But to get some actual proof of our theory, several conditions have to be fulfilled. First, you must have purchased the blue medicinal spirit from Rosemary and combined it with the necktie to create the highly flammable spirit bomb, which will serve as the ace up your sleeve in the fight with the mercenaries. Then, your secret weapon must miss its goal, which will have your necktie yell,
It's a fiasco, Bratan!
Lastly, you still need to save Kim, even after your blunder left one more gun on the battlefield to deal with. Then, when you wake up after the tribunal, Kim will give you a quick recap of the disaster and tell you that it was in fact you who yelled the necktie's line.
You tried to throw an improvised petroleum bomb. It missed. Then you said, "It's a fiasco, Bratan," in a funny voice.
It's a fiasco, Bratan!
Class.
Bruh! You're telling me that the tie has been me all along? That is crazy. What? I've said the necktie has said so much weird shit. There's no way that Kim wouldn't have like made mention of the weird shit I've said as the necktie. There's no way he would have been like, "What? What? Why did you say that fucked up shit?" It had to be just that incident where we said what the necktie said. There's no way. I kind of refuse to believe that one. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. Also, I can't believe you make a Molotov out of your necktie, but then you gotta like, you must lose your necktie. I won't be able to hear my necktie anymore for the rest of the playthrough. That'd be awful. I don't even know if I did actually.
Klaasje, Katazin, or Anouk. Klaasje is the first character we meet in the game.
Hello, officer.
And while the player is supposed to notice that there's more to her than what meets the eye, the rabbit hole goes away further. The first layer that you are openly presented with in the game is that, while we can only speculate about Trent Hiddleston, she actually is a professional spy.
Industrial espionage. I joined a business collective with the intention of betraying them. I took their ledgers, 2 decades worth of accounting.
She even
Why are we
admits to
looking
us
at
that her real
spoilers?
name is Katazin.
No spoilers here. I've played the game. I beat the game. So we're reacting to the iceberg. Yeah, I've already beat the game. My whole playthrough is on my YouTube channel. I'm just reacting to the Iceberg after the fact because I want to know everything. I want to know everything.
Elysium, and that Clasia is just a cover name that she uses to fly under the radar of the moral intern and her former employer. That employer, she says, gave her yet another fake name and a passport that identifies her as Anouk Meyer Smith. However, when we find the falsified passport, the fake name says Katazine Alasia, indicating that Katazine was not her real name but yet another cover identity.
Katazina Alasia was supposed to be her real name, where Clasia comes from. Remember?
Thank you for the follow. The guy on Twitter is because this is the Jamrock Hobo guy. He seems to make all kinds of Disco Elysium content. I think I do follow him on Twitter. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, damn it.
So what really is her real name?
I don't know. But it's not Katazina Alasia or Clasia or Anouk Meyer Smith. We didn't even scratch the surface with her, detective.
Not only do we never learn about her real name, but it is suggested that her past as an industrial spy might not tell the full story either. Because first of all, her skill set goes way beyond that of someone who allegedly only stole accounting ledgers. When Leeli the mercenary was shot in the head while having intercourse with her, she kept her cool and immediately devised a plan to hide the real cause of his death.
Faking a lynching was her idea. It really surprised me how quickly she was able to get a hold of herself once we got up there. She asked me to help her drag him into the shower so she could wind the shower head around his neck to fake lividity. Then she dressed him while I went to get the Hardy Boys.
Clasia knew exactly what she was doing. You can't remain calm under pressure otherwise.
I wasn't sure whether to admire her or be disturbed.
There is no reason for a thief of trade secrets to know how to fake lividity marks. And just like Trent, she too has received some martial arts training.
Toned over several years of self-defense training.
But I'm not a trained sambal fighter. I've never needed it outside the gym.
She's fought outside that gym of hers. That much is clear.
Additionally, why would a mere industrial spy be pursued by the full might of the moral intern instead of by the local responsible authorities? If what she says is true and she stole financial data and caused a few people to lose their jobs, then that would be way below the pay grade of Elysium's equivalent to Interpol. Kim too thinks that she might be something more dangerous than an industrial spy. He ends up being thankful that he didn't arrest her, even though he would have had a clear reason to.
Perhaps it's better that we didn't arrest her. Who knows what hell she'd be raising in my district by now.
Lastly, her people skills are off the charts. She managed to render all of Harry's detective skills useless.
These guys are compromised. She's got them singing along to her tune. You can't trust them anymore. Bullshit, man.
Oh yeah.
I ain't compromised. Especially that guy.
Naturally, she also had the...
That's actually a good point. I forgot that, like, during the game, my frickin' skills were telling me, like, you can't trust me anymore. You can't trust this guy anymore. That's crazy. I didn't like realize that it was specifically when talking to her though. That's such a cool detail. That's so cool.
Hardy Boys wrapped around her finger well enough to make them stage and confess to a lynching they didn't commit, something that isn't exactly a trivial offense.
Yeah.
So what do we make of this? When we look at the concrete impact of Clasia's presence in Martinez, we see that at the end of it stands war. All of her actions ultimately led to the escalation between Union forces and the Cronel mercenaries who protect the interests of the Wild Pines corporate group. The tribunal was not an accidental outcome, but the direct result of Clasia convincing the Hardy Boys to stage the lynching of the mercenary and thus aggravating his faction. Additionally, the hanging was presented to us as a convenient makeshift cop-out for Clasia when it was the exact opposite. If Clasia really was on the run, then a woman of her skills would have just moved town after Leeli got shot, instead of making it cause a huge scene and calling the RCM on it, which belongs to the exact same group that she pretends to flee from. It's the exact opposite of what a resourceful ex-spy who just wants to stay out of trouble would do. The only way I can explain her behavior is that she too might have been working with Wild Pines to increase the tensions between their soldiers and the Union, so that the mercenaries would have a probable cause to utilize their superior firepower, get rid of the Unionists and return ownership of the harbor to the hands of Wild Pines. All of this is still an educated guess, of course, but out of all possible explanations, especially those that Klaasje tells us herself, this is the only one that makes any sense to me. As always, feel free to tell me your opinion on this in the comments below.
Man, that Inlander shivers. I thought it was I thought it was logic that was telling me not to trust my other skills. God, I don't remember. I'm gonna have to go back and watch my playthrough and remember. Did it actually only happen when talking to her though? Because I'm pretty sure that happened more than once, where the skills became unreliable. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. That's so cool though. That's such a cool detail. Oh, it does happen. I thought it happened more than just with her. But it makes sense that she was able to like kind of manipulate your skills in her favor. I think that makes sense. That makes sense.
Fortress Accident meta commentary. When you break into the doomed commercial building, you will find the abandoned game studio Fortress Accident, where a small team of ambitious artists failed catastrophically in their attempt to make nothing less than a revolutionary role-playing game.
There's no way a little basement studio working here could pull anything like this off.
My God. It's as if the less money they had, the more ambitious their project became.
They thought they could bridge the gap with pure willpower and imagination. They couldn't.
If you are somewhat familiar with Disco Elysium's development process, then you might know that it too was precarious, to say the least. Zaum 2 once consisted of a small team of artists who never made a video game, but were united by a dream that far exceeded their financial means. It is no coincidence that Fortress Accident borrows its name from Zaum's former studio name Fortress Occident, back from when Disco Elysium was called No Truth with the Furries. And just like Fortress Accident is located in an old decrepit building that was by no means a suitable place for game development, so did Zaum spend its early days in abandoned art galleries and hippie squads.
I told the producers we need to go and move to a normal office building with amenities. But no, the artists like the milieu, the writers like the history. I told them. But no, normal office buildings are bourgeois.
The in-game studio also gave Disco's writers the chance to laugh at their own toxic mixture of delusions of grandeur on the one hand and a bohemian mode of operation on the other.
The writers, with their panic attacks and 3-hour lunches.
They certainly took their work very seriously, even if they seemed to be chronically liberal with their schedules. They seemed to believe they were historical individuals on some grand quest. But when the money started to run out, they just began to complain a lot about capitalism. In the end, they just didn't get it done.
A few more producers could have come in handy, especially when dealing with writers, some of whom routinely skip to work because of mental health issues and extremely unprofessional sleep schedules.
They didn't have enough willpower to produce something truly historic and to show up to work on time.
Showing up to work on time is hard.
Disco Elysium's eventual crunch period doesn't go unmentioned either.
Everyone is constantly teetering on the edge of the abyss. An abyss of production. So much pain. Back pain, neck pain, headaches, carpal tunnel, chest pain. No gym membership can make up for working in this manner.
But Fortress Accident is not just an analogy or cathartic self-mockery. It is also a what-if scenario for a world in which the Disco Elysium team failed to live up to its own aspirations. It shows.
Wow, Lamb, just rub it in that you can get to work on time, huh? Just rub it in. I telework and I have to like just crawl out of bed like 5 minutes before my shift starts and log into the computer. But yeah, I knew a little bit that this was talking about the actual game company that made Disco. It's a sort of a self-reflection of their
Why
development.
Disco Elysium, unlike their game, managed to release against all odds. Because what sealed Fortress Accident's fate was something that Zaum ultimately decided against.
Even then, success remained within an ever-narrowing margin of possibility that, despite everything, never entirely disappeared. That is, until they discovered the Valley of the Heads. At the 11th hour, the lead designer decided that what We're Out Untethered needed was a secret mystical location at the extreme edge of the map.
A secret location at the very edge of the map seems to mirror Disco's original plan to have the huge underground area with the Coke Skull as a part of the initial release. But unlike Fortress Accident, Zaum actually showed some restraint and financial responsibility and postponed this potentially catastrophic plan to a future DLC. The second feature that sank Fortress Accident was again something that Zaum ultimately decided to postpone until after the original release, because Fortress Accident planned to add an insane amount of voice acting to their game.
The player would have been able to choose a head for their headless party member, and each head would have been voiced on air by a professional actor. There were approximately 10,000 heads.
Unlike the Coke Skull DLC, this was of course eventually added to Disco Elysium with over 1 million words of voice acting in the final cut. And as a last remark, I must say that I respect the guts of Disco's development team to include Fortress Accident in their game. I personally would have been far too afraid to jinx my own project by creating a version of it where all my work ends up in vain. But who knows, maybe it kept the team sane to create a place to project all the doubt and anxiety on.
Your IT? I'm not IT. I don't know if that was at LAM or... I do not work in IT, but I do telework. I think it's cute that they included their, like, little fantasy game company that failed. I'm glad they didn't fail, but also all the developers of Disco are no longer with that company, so... Yeah.
Deserters POV Part 2 High as Hell. Earlier we discussed how the game presents us with the murderer's perspective from the very moment we boot up the game. And while that little factoid has been circulating for a while now, I think that I can also make out something more. Because maybe the psychedelic animations and color choices of the menu art are not just an artistic choice, but again stem from the perspective of the deserter himself. When you encounter him on the island, Kim and you notice that there's something off about him. He is weirdly animated and erratic, not to mention unusually horny for classier for a man of his age and health. But when you ask him if he's using any psychoactive substances, he denies it.
No, I won't be stuffed full of shit like the rest of this city.
Shortly after, however, we find out that he has been under the biochemical influence of the insulindian phasmid for the last few decades.
So I use a neurodegenerative element to aid in camouflage.
The phasmid's chemicals, it turns out, have an invigorating and aphrodisiac side effect, but its main purpose is to cloud one's mind and vision to support its camouflage. And it does so successfully as the deserter doesn't react to the phasmid's reveal at all.
What are you talking about? There's nothing there.
And if the amounts are strong enough to make the deserter unable to see the 3-meter stick insect that is standing right next to him, even after we lure it out, then we can assume that they cause some kind of optical hallucinations. So maybe the city panorama is not just depicted from the deserter's location, but from his very eyes.
康尼主义
Or communism, in a way. When a Chinese translation was added to Disco Elysium a few months after the initial release, the game became a surprise hit in China.
It is a suitcase full of fan art from China.
Since we already touched on the Japanese translation in this video, you can imagine that translating Disco Elysium to Chinese proves to be just as difficult. But in addition to the usual problems of localization, there were now also concerns about censorship in regards to a political ideology that Disco Elysium deals with extensively, namely communism.
However, in the Chinese language version, this was likely deemed too sensitive of a subject. Instead of the word for communism, the game invents a new word that has no meaning.
The YouTube channel Censored Gaming has covered this issue before and describes how instead of the usual Chinese word for communism,
共产主义
the translation makes up a new word for it,
康尼主义
a word that is not used by the Chinese Communist Party and thus avoids censorship. The problem with that accusation, however, is that
康尼主义
is by no means just a made-up word. The first two characters sound like come me and mimic the English commie. The ending Xuyi is simply a suffix indicating an ism. The result is a mix of a translation and a transliteration, meaning an approximation of the original word sound of the word communism. And since every translation is always also a localization, maybe the translator simply deemed it more fitting to operate with a word that references European-style communism as opposed to the very specific notion of communism that the Chinese Communist Party uses, a notion that this Elysium might simply not have intended. I also found out that commi was already used in Chinese internet slang to refer to communism without using the official party term with all of its connotations. According to the Chinese people I asked about this, it was really this Elysium though that popularized the term on the Chinese internet. Lastly, the instances when this Elysium talks about communism in a derogatory way or makes fun of it don't seem to be censored in the Chinese translation either. Rhetoric will still tell you to get the firing squads ready once you opt into the ideology. However, when you read the case file about the next world mural, instead of ending with "wreak havoc on the middle class", it now reads "the bourgeoisie is wreaking havoc". It's quite an amusing irony that China now lets you slander communism to your heart's content, but suddenly becomes very protective once you question its newfound middle class.
That's actually so interesting that they had to make up a word for communism, but that made-up word was actually like low-key already used as slang and just popularized it. If you have vids to recommend for Disco, feel free. And I think Lamb is talking about posting a picture in my Discord. My Discord server. Oh, yep. I see your drink that you just posted, Lamb. Egg cream cold foam cold brew. Ooh. Bro, and you posted picture of food. I'm fucking hungry. Why would you do this to me? That actually looks fucking bomb. That looks really good. Are you actually a barista, Lamb? That looks yummy. Make me hungry! Even have a very big cocktail bar? Holy shit. You can share. Feel free to share. Okay, let us continue. We still have an hour left of this video.
Harry calls himself. Harry's visit to the payphone is most famous for his devastating conversation with his ex-girlfriend Dora. But there's one more interaction that caught my eye. When you call a random number for the fourth time, a depressed man picks up and simply says, "I'm tired."
Wait, there are two lambs. Wait, I just realized that lamp fowl. I have two lambs in my chat right now. Oh god. Oh god, they're multiplying. Somebody send help. One lamb was already enough. Now we have two lambs. That's crazy. Detective arriving video. Maybe it's me on two accounts. Hold on. Don't look at my recommendeds that pop up. Detective arriving. Okay. I'll have it queued up. We have to finish this one first though.
If you offer to help him, he will wave it off and mumble, "There is nothing," which is the first line in the game spoken by Harry's reptilian brain.
There is nothing.
Our mysterious dialogue partner is not listed in the credits, but I'm 90% sure that we hear Mikey Goodman, who voices Harry's karaoke scenes, and his reptilian brain. But what made me suspicious is that when the call ends, it says,
"You do not hear the customary disconnect tone, just silence in the handset. The machine is still waiting for you to dial a number."
It's as if the call didn't really happen. So who knows, maybe it's all in Harry's head, or we might again be dealing with Pale interferences and receive Harry's voice from another point in time. After all, this happens with Kim's voice a few times in the game.
It's cold now. A slight frisson at the point where your neck meets your spine. Something about the lieutenant's words directed at you, but not you.
I didn't say anything, Detective.
Someone has been maintaining it. The wiring has been repaired.
An uncomfortable silence falls over the connection.
It's been a long winter. Long and cold.
It certainly does sound like me.
Sounds like your partner's being haunted by his past self. Or maybe he's trying to warn himself. From the future, most like.
It's just a little bit of pale interference, Detective. It's cold now, but someone has been maintaining it. The wiring has been repaired. It's been a long winter, long and cold.
What? We actually heard Kim from the future? That's sick. Alright, let me see your liquor cabinet. Sheesh. God damn. Hold on. Oh my god, it's huge. Why is your liquor cabinet so big? Look at this liquor cabinet. Oh shit, I'm moving my chat. Look at that. Very nice. I don't drink much myself, but that's a lot of money in alcohol right there. I know that much. I know that much. Motherfucker. Whatever.
Nuclear strike on Revachol. When you speak to the city through shivers, it will tell you that it's afraid to die in a future nuclear attack.
Death. It is terrifying. In 22 years, the first shot will be fired. Not a shot from a gun. An atomic device that will level all of me. All of me.
Sacred and Terrible Air, which plays after the events of Disco Elysium, confirms this fear. Because indeed, 22 years after the game's events, a fleet from Mesk fires a nuclear bomb on Revachol. The attack is led by the nihilist innocent San Miro, who attacks Revachol to accelerate the world's descent into the Pale. It is unclear, however, whether it was a conventional nuke that destroyed Revachol or a so-called weapon of mass negation, which would be a reference to the philosophical underpinning of the Pale that we will discuss at the end of this layer. Not much is known about these weapons, but they seem to be a way to weaponize Pale. Maybe Samiro completed their development and became able to use his nihilism to manifest Pale in the same way that the anti-nihilistic inframaterialists repel it. But that's speculation. What we do know for sure is that, one way or the other, Revachol's fate seems to be sealed, together with that of any character of the game who still remained in the city. The end of Elysium. To make things worse, it's not just Revachol for whom the Apocalypse Cop's intuition will have proven true.
A countdown has begun. All will collapse on itself. The world will disappear into a single grain of blackness. All sound will be muted. All life will scream.
This hunch about the end of the world becomes more concrete as Harry casually recites this enigmatic countdown. When Kim asks you,
"What did you do before you volunteered?"
you can tell him that you walked the land telling whores and liars of the end to come. There are 9,855 days remaining.
Cool. Let's move on, shall we?
9,855 days add up to 28 years until the end of the world. And while it's easy to dismiss this as the eccentric rambling of our little harbinger of doom, the number does seem to carry an unfortunate weight. The very last dev block before Disco's release ends with a framing of the game's timeline. 4 days, it says, until the district explodes in violence. 28 years remain until the end of the world. It seems that the unprompted prophecies of the Apocalypse Cop proved to be true once again, and that Disco Elysium is truly set in a pre-apocalyptic setting awaiting the end of its world. However, this coming end of the world might just be less conclusive than one might imagine. Throughout the game, we encounter hints at a sort of cyclical cosmology of Elysium that oscillates between being and nothingness. Half-Light, after all, foretells the coming Pale Apocalypse as
Palindropos.
Palindropos is a concept that is central to the philosophy of Heraclitus. It means as much as turning back, changing directions, or turning into the opposite. In this case, what is returned to seems to be the primordial void found in the Pale Superdeeps, a void that will soon cover the entirety of Elysium. It is no coincidence that the Pale-worshipping Crabman refers to the 2mm Pale Hole as
the state of the world before reality began.
The state that he wishes upon the entire world is highly ambivalent. After all, he describes the end of the world as something that is, at the same time, its origin. The void that will consume the world is the one from which reality was formed in the first place. Half-Light's description of the Pale Apocalypse as Palindropos seems to be the philosophical principle of this exact movement. In Heraclitus, it explains the process of how an abundance of one force will negate itself and turn back into its opposite. If we apply this to the opposition of Elysium and the Pale, which both seem to have originally emerged from each other, we arrive at a cosmology of eternal return, of a cycle of being and nothingness. The cyclical nature of Elysium is also reflected in the central exaltation of Dolorianism.
After life, death. After death, life again. After the world, the Pale. After the Pale, the world again.
And there might indeed be signs in Elysium of a past world, of one that vanished into the Pale just like the current one is about to. High up in the atmosphere, 3 satellites seem to orbit Elysium. Sacred and Terrible Air describes them as communication satellites that actively observe the Pale that is advancing underneath them. At the time of the game's events, mankind hasn't reached orbit yet and doesn't even know whether their world is a disk or a sphere. That's why we can assume that the satellites stem from a previous iteration of Elysium. Disco Elysium writer Agutulik also confirms that the satellite's construction predates the current Elysium's 8,000 years of written history. It seems like they survived the last apocalypse by moving in safe distance from the all-engulfing Pale and are now analyzing the vicious cycle that repeats itself below them.
After the world, the Pale. After the Pale, the world again.
Whoa. I liked being the apocalyptic cop. The cop of the apocalypse. I think that was my favorite. And he was right. Why does he know that the world is ending? Maybe it's like how the Pale is doing like some time travel shit. I don't know. Oh no, the lambs are becoming best friends. We're about to experience a lamb apocalypse. Y'all are gonna get up to some mischief, I just know it.
Anthroponetics level 2, less than nothing. While we already covered possible origins and effects of the Pale, as well as countermeasures against it, we yet have to explain what the Pale really is. Because while notions like entropy or nothingness give us a rough idea of the Pale, they don't really cover its conceptual intricacies. Thankfully, both Disco Elysium and Sacred and Terrible Air left us with hints about the ontological makeup of the Pale, mostly in reference to 2 philosophers. The first one is the German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. While constructing the world of Elysium, Disco's lead designer Robert Kurwitz said that he
became super interested in this guy called Hegel, this philosopher called Hegel.
Kurwitz went so far as to eventually call Hegelianism the central principle of Elysium's world building, and went on record to say that to make a video game,
you need a philosophy guy, someone needs to understand Hegel and actually read him.
The other philosopher is Slavoj Žižek, a contemporary Hegelian theorist. Kurwitz is again a fan of his.
I like Less Than Nothing by Žižek. I think that's the best Žižek book. Less Than Nothing is his take on Hegel.
A depiction of the armchair Marxist has even found its way onto official Disco Elysium art.
Magpie should be deeper in the iceberg. Yeah, they talked about magpies right at the beginning of the iceberg, I think, which felt like a lot for the very top of the iceberg. But I mean, we're getting some more context, I think, about the Pale. The Pale is so cool. What a cool concept.
Head writer Helen Hindper too commented in an interview that, philosophically, it doesn't perhaps come as a surprise that we're fans of Slavoj Žižek. His term Less Than Nothing became one of the ways we described the Pale in the game.
Then what is that?
It's nothing. No, it's less than nothing.
Zizek's concept of the less than nothing can be understood as a radicalization of Hegel's notions of nothingness and negation, which we will get into first. A little heads up, this topic is the densest in the video, but we will get back into more tangible waters in no time.
Oh no.
In the previous topic we already discussed how the nothingness of the pale isn't just a motionless void, but at the same time the origin of reality. That will in a way be the gist of this chapter too. When we ask Joyce what the
I really want to read Sacred and Terrible Air. If somebody can tell me how to get an English translation, please.
pale is, she will define it as the
transition state of being into nothingness,
and
the negation of being.
on the very first pages of his Science of Logic, Hegel goes through this exact transition of being into nothingness that Joyce attributes to the pale. For Hegel, this transition is inherent to being as such, since being is conceptually the same as nothingness. The notion of pure being, after all, would be abstract and empty. It would really only claim the existence of a space or void without content or distinction, which we could justifiably call nothingness. Since both concepts immanently refer to and vanish into their opposites, the relation between being and nothingness remains dynamic. The logic of this exact dynamic has found its way into Sacred and Terrible Air. When the entreprenaut Ziggy flies his airship into the depths of the Pale, he receives a recurring radio code from the Rodionov Trench, a Pale superdeep like the one the Pale driver mentioned. The code that is emitted by it spells absolute negation. This is again some Hegelian shenanigan. Hegel differentiates between abstract and absolute negation. In the last example of being and nothingness, nothingness is the first and abstract negation of being. The simple antithesis, however, fails to be a true negation of being and thus only finds itself negated. Only this negation of negation, or absolute negation, is what truly heightens the simple opposition into something new. In our example, Hegel finds the contradiction between being and nothingness to be mediated or sublated in the next higher logical category of becoming. It is this logic of restless self-negating negativity that constitutes reality, ours and Elysium's.
Oh my god, you actually have the link. Holy shit. Wait, let me just save that for later. Thank you for the link. I actually really want to read that, and I had no idea where I could get a translation, so thank you so much.
That being said, when Joyce says that the pale is the negation of being and the transition of being into nothingness, it doesn't just mean change or dynamism, but also something more severe. When Harry concludes his research of the pale with Sona, he finds out that the pale actually consists of two distinct elements. What the inhabitants of Elysium call the pale seems to be merely the effect of a more radical nothingness found in the depths of it, in the form of pale superdeeps like the aforementioned Rodionov Trench, or as the 2mm miniature version in the church. The pale, you find out, is only an effect, a transition between the world and that.
Then what is that?
It's nothing. No, it's less than nothing.
It's less than nothing, you answer, the final rest state for reality. Disco Elysium's distinction between the pale and the superdeep is Zizek's distinction between Hegel's nothing and a less than nothing, because in order to even arrive at Hegel's notion of nothingness, which, as mentioned earlier, is an already productive category and not at all different from being, one has to first separate it from a pre-ontological abyss that would be less than nothing, a zero level that precedes Hegel's dialectics of being and nothingness. It is in this abyss that Zizek posits the very concept of absolute negation as the primordial crack in reality whose motor of self-negating negativity delivers the initial spark of creation. In other words, the negativity that in Hegel permeates the dialectical process of reality is, for Zizek, the traumatic rupture from which reality emerges from in the first place. Reality is nothingness that has negated itself. It is its own wound. Back in Elysium, philosophical concepts are of course treated with a certain creative freedom and rule of the cool, but we are now able to understand why the Rodionov Trench superdeep emanates the world's absolute negation, and why the Crabman worships the 2mm pale hole as
the state of the world before reality began.
It also makes more sense now when the 2mm paleonormally is referred to as a rupture or hole in reality. The concept of a less than nothing, or what you can call the less than nothing in the game, might also describe why everything that is captured by the pale superdeep is not just erased from existence, but, and this is an essential difference, will have never existed. The prime example for this is the airship Hanankur from Sacred and Terrible Air. It went missing on an inter-esolary flight when it was swallowed by a pale superdeep. But the ship didn't just go missing. Instead, it entered a state of never having existed. The people of Elysium lost all memory of the famous ship and its passengers. The Hanankur also disappeared from photographs, and even the few remaining replicas of the ship are at risk of vanishing if they aren't actively paid attention to. The ship might have ventured into
the state of the world before reality began.
Wait, these examples are actually extremely helpful because I was like trying to wrap my head around the idea of something less than nothing. Because like nothing is already nothing. How can there be less than nothing? But when you give the examples of like existence, that's clicking. That's clicking for me. It's not just nothing. It is less than nothing. It's literally not existing. You are retroactively erased from memories and what photos and diagrams, and that was actually such a good example.
It went less than missing, if you will. So
Yeah.
while the relative nothingness of the pale rips apart objects, subjects and concepts alike, the Hanankur seems to have ventured into something more severe, into the preconceptual and pre-ontological abyss of what is less than nothing. Before we descend to the final layer of the iceberg, I will use a quick moment to speed through some honorable mentions and nice-to-know trivia that did not make it on the main roster. When you pull the mercenary's boots off his corpse, parts of his feet come off and remain stuck in the boots. To clean them, you have to cook the boots in the whirling's kitchen, where you create a pot of corpse soup in the process.
A two-course dinner of rotten flesh and hardened ceramic.
A legendary half-light check will then suggest that
you should taste some.
And if you follow his recommendation, it is revealed that Harry might just have a culinary affinity for his fellow humans.
You've awakened the hunger. There is no turning back now. Better invest in a good cookbook and stock up on salt.
At the end of the ultra-liberal political quest, you can hire Idiot Doomspiral as your personal brand strategist. He will then redecorate the town's monument with regards to your respective copper type. The Matchbox Tower that you build with the student communists is a reference to Tedlin's Tower, the proposed monument to the Third Communist International. Intended as a symbol of hope, the helix structure was supposed to represent the dialectical upward spiral of history. The ambitious structure forever remained a proposal and never made it past its model stage. The inframaterialists believe that revolutionary fervor enhances agricultural productivity. This is a reference to Lysenkoism, which rejected bourgeois biology in favor of what it called Marxist genetics. As you might have imagined, this one didn't work out either. The map that you can acquire in the bookstore is a pitch for a rebuilt Martinez. The proposal was created by a Ravacholian design studio to lure investors back into the city. Only the Bright Cube, the Möbius advertising agency, was actually built. It's located right behind the Delta Logistics company truck and would have probably been a location in the DLC.
Clean white light coming from the windows of a clean cube-shaped office building hidden amidst ruins. A secret.
We do not know what the Egg or the Firing Squad are doing there, or why the designers depicted Martinez as being torn apart by the Pale. The wheel, however, would have been a reconstruction of the pre-revolutionary Ferris wheel that you can still reminisce about in a visual calculus check.
The pleasure wheel stands still on the boardwalk, its 12 red cabins suspended in the air.
An old case file with the name The Collapsing Tenement was cut from the game. It tells the story of how Harry had to evacuate a building on the verge of collapse, only for its residents to move right back in because they couldn't afford another place to live. The file suggests that soon the building will collapse and bury all of its 200 residents under it. It also reveals that Harry's civil specialization in cop school was building safety regulations. The game still references this when Harry is compelled to make random remarks about Martinez's defunct infrastructure.
A construction code violation if there ever was one.
When the game constantly reminds you that time is of the essence, since tensions are rising and the tribunal might happen any moment, that couldn't be farther from the truth. You can in fact stall the late game events indefinitely, since the encounter with the mercenaries only triggers once you met Ruby. If you ever wondered why you repeatedly fail the check to communicate with the Insulindian Phasmid, no matter how many times you save scum, it's because Morel didn't spray you with pheromones. He only does that when you agree to help him on his Phasmid hunt. Without it, the check is destined to fail no matter your stats or dice roll. It's nice to see belief rewarded. In this video we have covered both communist and capitalist extra-physics, or inframaterialism, and the Weise-Wiesemann coefficient. The game, however, regularly hints at a third branch of extra-physics that is, this time, connected to fascist ideology.
Unless you believe in ancient fascist magic, like some wannabe magus.
Actually, it's called extra-physics, and you don't need to be a magus to access it.
Disco's NPCs rarely react to your clothing choices, but if you wear René's clothes in front of Everard, he will ask you why you're wearing the clothes of his recently deceased Night Watchman.
Mr. Dubois, why on earth you dress like my recently deceased security guard? Stealing the clothes of a security guard who'd only just died of old age? Well, maybe not entirely.
Very awkward. Speaking about outfits, with 8 or more electrochemistry, you will detect the most seductive clothing item in the game, a skin-tight leopard-patterned bodysuit. When Composure warns you that it will become your second skin, and that you won't be able to tell where you end and the leopard begins, it wasn't joking. It's the only piece of clothing that changes your very character model, and literally becomes a replacement of Harry's skin. And there's no option to ever take it off again.
It's wearing you now.
What?
Harry might have been present when Victor Mejean, the working-class husband, died. Harry was close to the boardwalk at the time of his death before the start of the game, while he was partying with Idiot Doom Spiral and his friends next door. It would explain why Harry, when he meets the unsuspecting widow, immediately insists that something must be wrong with her husband. When you purchase the Dick Mullen detective novel and get both Mullen's head and the pinball maker's coat, you activate the
Modus Mullen.
It will code your game in a film noir shader and activate a few one-liners that are appropriate for a hard-boiled detective. The fictional detective Dick Mullen also seems to be a reference to the comedian Nick Mullen, thus completing the trifecta of 2010's Dirtbag Left podcasts represented in the game. When you decide to wipe the mirror and take a look at your face, you will witness the expression, a horrific grin on the face of a late-stage alcoholic. Before the final cut version of the game, however, Harry's expression was even more diabolical. It might have just been too terrifying to leave it in the game. When you activate the hardcore mode, you will not only hear Egghead yell "Hardcore!", but the lights in the DeLorean church will light up to the beats of the rave. The 3,500-year-old pictogram of a human being that you can paint on the big wall is the logo of the German experimental music group Einstürzende Neubauten. You can also see their logo scribbled on the side of the Feld building next to other great artwork. If you stand motionless next to Kim for long enough, you start cracking each other's backs. Kim is dealing with it far more gracefully than you though. When you first meet Tommy Lehom, he will sing the lyrics of the song Want to Be Free by Sea Power, the band behind Disco's soundtrack.
I am a gander and a hunter and a gatherer, feel like a traveler from another planet.
And lastly, let's reveal what's arguably the game's best kept secret. At the very end of the game, when you look very closely, you will notice that the mysterious blonde man with sunglasses that you met at the Whirling was actually Jean-Vic Maire, your former partner at the 41st Precinct all along.
How much more betrayal can I take?
Layer 4. Elysium is run on a Feld tape computer. Elysium's computers are not like ours. At the time of the game's events, the most advanced type of computation is done on radio computers like the one left behind in the Fortress Accident Studio, or the one Sona uses to analyze the Pale Hole. The Moral Intern too uses them to create their contingency spreads. They work through a kind of cloud computing, albeit of a more literal kind than ours. They send their data through antennas to a central front of radio waves, where their requests are literally processed on air. This doesn't make much sense yet, but we will get back to it. This type of radio computation, although dominant in all of Elysium, hasn't always been unrivaled. More than 50 years before the events of the game, a team of Revacholian cybernetic engineers started nothing short of an electronic revolution.
It was here in Martinez, possibly in this very building, that they developed prototypes for a tape computer. An elegant folding mechanism of rollers and ferrotape ribbons, portable enough to be a take-it-home solution, which is a feat of engineering even today's giants, Rehm, ICN and ZAM, haven't achieved yet.
The name of this tape computer was the Felt Playback Experiment. Unlike radio computers, these prototypes were able to compute all operations on-site and store their operation history on their magnetic tapes. Ironically, this electronical revolution was nipped in the bud by an equally short-lived political one. The revolutionaries of the commune of Ravachol liquefied Felt's assets and destroyed their tape computer prototypes. Their reason for this remains a mystery.
Who knows? Maybe it was an accident, or maybe they didn't want the technology to end up in the wrong hands. Either way, they're all gone now. All 3 versions of the prototype.
Earlier this video I mentioned a 4th prototype that seems to be stored away in what was once planned to be an underground DLC area.
Or was there a 4th prototype that remains hidden in the mausoleums below Cold City?
But as it stands right now, the Felt Playback Experiment will remain a piece of lost future. As to the destruction of the futuristic devices, the communards might have destroyed them for the same reason that Arno van Eyck discarded his revolutionary music record, because they felt like they're dealing with something that was not supposed to exist just yet. The dangers of anachronistic novelty was something that we discussed here before, and the Felt Playback experience was indeed something that did not seem to organically fit into the technological timeline of Elysium, because even at the time of the game, after 50 more years of technological development, no one in the entirety of Elysium has come up with something even similarly advanced. This hypothesis seems to be supported by how Trant describes the Felt computers as alien-looking and out of this world.
No one even knows what a computer made entirely of tape would look like, but word has it, they were very elegant, exquisite, alien-looking turn-of-the-century hardware.
But that is just a side note about this topic, which remains to be about how Elysium itself is run on a Felt tape computer. If you ever so much as looked at the game, you have already encountered the first argument for this egregious claim. Because even if you never heard Trant's story of the Felt prototypes, you have seen its name plastered all over the game's menus and UI elements, which are modeled after this exact tape computer. We encounter its name in the main menu, the skill menu, our journal, the pause menu, and most importantly on the dialog box, in which the game's text is projected on a reel of the Felt computer's magnetic tape. The sound of the menus also mimic that of an old tape machine. Korwitz himself confirmed in an old dev blog that the Felt Playback Experiment serves as the game's dialogue engine and that the entire UI is designed around it. And this was not merely an aesthetic choice. The blog entry ends with the line, "As a bonus, it's part of an in-world mystery." This mystery is not just that one more Felt prototype was supposed to be discovered in the DLC. Because when I said that Disco Elysium is played on a Felt tape computer, I didn't just mean that the game's UI is inspired by it, but that the very logic of Elysium's reality corresponds to that of a role-playing game that is being played on a Felt tape computer. This becomes apparent every time when Disco Elysium's inner logic reaches the game's surface. The most obvious occasion of this happening is in your dialogue with Dora/Dolores Day.
You can't even talk like a normal person anymore. It's always lists with you. Questions.
To which you can answer, they're not lists, they're trees.
This is another one, isn't it? We're in a tree right now.
Dora correctly identifies Harry as an RPG protagonist who maneuvers the conversation through a list of dialogue options that do in fact look like a tree. Harry can also attempt to exit out of the conversation tree by clicking the generic "let's talk about something else" option, which again does not fool her.
See? Let's talk about something else.
Fittingly, she sums up the end of your relationship by saying that
every combination of words has been played out.
It seems that, in classic video game fashion, Harry has gone through all the possible branches of his dialogue tree, only to see none of them working out in his favor. Measurehead 2 addresses this tree-like structure of Elysium. When we ask him how to turn back time, he will tell us that it's not possible for someone who lacks any understanding of what he calls the reality rhizome.
You want to return to the past and you don't even know what you're facing? Maybe it's for the best. It is too late to explain the intricacies of the reality rhizome if the opportunity to learn its fundamental terms has passed you.
While we call a primary access to Elysium the dialogue tree, a rhizome would actually be the more accurate term, since it describes a web of interconnected roots that split up, intersect and converge. And if you ever used any game engine, then you know that it's not just the dialogue, but the entirety of a game's logic that is rhizomatic by nature. Measurehead's reality rhizome accurately describes the rhizomatic reality of the game Disco Elysium. He is right to say that if Harry wanted to turn back time, he would have to track back his timeline through the game's routes and nodes. Lastly, the Coalition warship confirms that the Moral Intern 2 has a very similar concept of Elysium's game-like reality and timelines. When you ask the Coalition spokesperson about contingency spreads, they say,
"You might also imagine these spreads as a kind of tree, with every juncture representing a different event, and every branch representing a different timeline."
The contingency spreads of the Moral Intern that we talked about before are used to map the branches of this tree or rhizome and monitor the progression of their timeline. Contingency here also refers to the randomness of their universe, whose fate, just like that of every other classic RPG, is ultimately subjected to a roll of the dice.
It's like every time you cast a die, something disappears. Some alternative ending or an entirely different world.
Oh my god.
This randomness seems to be not just constitutive to our interaction with Elysium as an RPG, but to its world itself. The Moral Intern's contingency spreads correspond to the stochastic nature of Elysium. They're able to detect when the universe's law of large numbers is violated by anomalies, be they of anthroponetic nature or due to the activity of magpies or innocences.
Just as some events are less probable than others. While we expect the vast majority of realities will fall within a normal confidence interval, there must necessarily be some that fall outside that range as well.
Fittingly, you can reply to this that every event is just a violent roll of the die, like in an RPG. To this, the Coalition spokesperson will answer that
It may be. We are only a psychosignaler, not a metaphysician.
But I think that only by attempting a bit of metaphysics can we explain the mystery of radio computation. If you remember the beginning of this topic, we talked about how radio computers miraculously compute data on air by simply sending it into the world through radio waves. But, and hear me out here, if the world itself is doing the computation, then we have to assume that the world is, by definition, a computer, in this case a felt tape computer on which the world of Elysium is played. It sounds like a far-fetched crackpot theory, but it would be a conclusion that explains radio computation, why Harry behaved like an RPG protagonist even before the events of the game, why Elysium's in-world logic follows that of a game, and lastly why we access the world of Elysium through the interface of a felt tape computer.
Game? Everything is just a game to you, isn't it?
Bro, that's fucking deep. That is freaking deep. It's a fun theory, though. Is this the PC that the Pale told them about? Did the Pale say something about a computer? Oh, Tread is here to chime in and answer your question. That's widowy queasy.
Dolores Day Truthers and the founding party Deep State. A truther is a person who doubts the generally accepted account of an event, believing that an official conspiracy exists to conceal the true explanation. Canonically, there was at least one Dolores Day Truther in the Elysium universe, a man who doubted her legitimacy and very humanity to the point of assassinating her.
A small attaché of officials stood by as her Theriers placed a white gold wreath on her head. The crowning was mostly witnessed by Secret Servicemen. One of the men in this Secret Service killed her 22 years later, a young man who had come to suspect that Dolores Day was not entirely human, but something else. Something that had walked in our midst, watching us stumble for hundreds, if not thousands of years, until it decided to interfere in the course of our history. We were supposed to come up with this ourselves. The man was reported to have screamed at the innocents. Dolores Day was shot in the chest with a fowling piece 8 times. The man, thought to be insane, said he once touched her and her body had been unnaturally warm, like a furnace, and that sometimes, while on duty, he observed her forgetting to breathe for over 10 minutes.
The Innocences of Elysium have always possessed inhuman knowledge, intelligence, and charisma, but they were never reported to be inhuman themselves, just ordinary humans with outstanding abilities. They were prophets, not aliens. The humanity of Dolores Day, however, was not just doubted by her eventual assassin.
This inhuman quality was witnessed by many others as well, glowing lungs and all. There was something ominous about Dolores Day. Little is known of her Marchese husband. It's as if he vanished from history after completing his role, which was to introduce Dolores Day to court. In conclusion, yes, there is something lonely, paranoid, and even terrifying that people seldom mention but feel when they think of her.
Her alien biology, an unusually secretive crowning ceremony, and a husband who vanished from historical records all spurred doubts of her legitimacy and humanity. And it doesn't exactly curb the conspiracy theories that the founding party that elected her in the first place is an organization that is just as secretive and powerful as the Innocences themselves.
There exists a group called the Founding Party, known as the Holy Party, during the time of the Pericarnacian. This, the world's oldest international organization, spends its time in search of either the re-emergence of the Innocents or new members.
It was this very founding party that created the Moral Intern in order to honor Dolores Day's political project even after her death and continue her life's work without her direct input. And it surely was convenient that the next Innocence they elected was Sola, the anti-Innocence, who famously avoided meddling in the political affairs of the Moral Intern altogether, leaving all power in the hands of the founding party. Beyond that, it was members of the founding party who invented Elysium's equivalent of finance capital and went on to found the world's largest investment banks. All of this makes them the target of conspiracy theories, with the alleged Innocence Dolores Day in their center. So what do we make of this combination of a potentially inhuman being getting crowned by Elysium's global deep state? Independent of what Dolores Day really is, she doesn't really seem to fit the role of an Innocence whose historical role is to advance humanity. Instead, she created an ideology that
isn't change, not even incremental change. It is control over yourself and the world.
And control the world they did. Eventually, a third of humanity was subjugated under their global bureaucracy, with the elusive founding party pulling the strings. The subjugated states are provided with a sense of national independence through Moral Intern-endorsed pseudo-elections with thoroughly harmless parties. This road to global hegemony was paved with brutal resettlement programs, mandatory re-education camps, and an overall suppression of dissidents.
She was a war criminal, a mass murderer.
This of course happened under the guise of a global humanist project, all while committing horrible acts of violence against those who didn't adhere to its very specific notion of universalism.
Dissenters were suppressed by a military force she called the Army of Humanity, suggesting those who fight against it are not part of humanity.
It was, after all, under Dolores Day's command that tens of millions died because the commune of Revachol dared to exist peacefully. But if you listen closely, it seems like she didn't even create those institutions herself, but merely signed them off.
She codified parliamentary democracy and created modern institutions. Among these, the Moral Intern.
My theory is that she was no great individual of history at all, but a prop that was groomed by the founding party to legitimize their vision of world domination and to serve as their popular and beautiful figurehead. Her purpose as the world's Innocence was to lend the actions of the Moral Intern a sublime air of religious sanctity. The founding party being picky with Innocences would also explain the all too convenient emergence of the next Innocent, Sola, who they crowned because she wouldn't cause any harm to their now established power. And after all, the emergence of Innocences was never as clean and definite as the founding party made it sound.
There have been a number of counter or false Innocences, some assumed to have innocentic qualities, some who just thought so themselves. Occasionally, they have the support of a faction inside the ecclesiastic organization, and accusations of foul play have arisen.
This too indicates that, contrary to the founding party's official dogma, there might be many people with innocentic abilities existing at the same time, among whom the founding party chooses the one who is most compatible with its political goals. Lastly, the founding party's instrumentalization of Innocences would also explain why the current Moral Intern diligently scans Elysium for contingencies and abnormalities. Because the current century is still waiting for a new Innocence to emerge, and they would have to either groom or disappear potential candidates before they become public. Regarding the theory of Dolores Day not being human, I could only speculate about it with little support from the game itself. I think you have to make up your own mind about this and then tell me what you think in the comments below. There is definitely something fishy about her though, and the next topic might just shed a bit of light on it.
That was a lot. She's like a... Well, this wasn't confirmed that she's like an alien, but she's got like golden lungs. But is essentially just a figurehead, I guess.
Dora is Dolores Day's reincarnation. Throughout the game, there are several occasions at which Harry conflates the innocent Dolores Day with his ex-girlfriend Dora Ingalund. Most prominently, he blends them together in his dream when he lies down for a nap in the Sea Fortress. And even without any crackpot theories, there are relatively mundane explanations for this connection. Dora was a quasi-sacred entity for Harry, whose loss robbed him of his will to live. She wielded absolute power over him, and he felt like only her love could release him from his misery. It's not too far-fetched that he ended up deifying her in a way. Then, as we step slightly into the extra-physical realms, there is also the presence of the enormous glass painting of Dolores Day in the church, the place where Harry lost his memories. And since it was Dora's presence in his memories that made him want to forget in the first place, her vacuum might have been filled by the most imposing female presence in his immediate vicinity, one that not only bears a physical resemblance to his ex-girlfriend, but even a similar name. But what if the conflation of the two is not just a psychological or anthroponetical phenomenon, but is instead due to them really being one person? On the most superficial level of this claim, one would again have to mention that both have a similar name and appearance. But if we delve deeper, we could for a moment entertain the belief of her assassin, who deemed her to be nothing less than an immortal being.
Something that had walked in our midst, watching us stumble for hundreds, if not thousands of years, until it decided to interfere.
If we read Dolores Day's motto in the same literal way, then we can assume that this long life might have not happened uninterrupted, but through several incarnations.
After life, death. After death, life again. After the world, the Pale. After the Pale, the world again.
And now the Dora/Dolores fusion in Harry's dream suddenly makes sense. We only have to take her too at her literal word.
I was someone else then, filled to the brim with love for you, hanging on your every word. Oh, Harry, you were the coolest, but I am no longer that person. This has taken her place. That was someone else. I betrayed her, overwrote her, and am happier for it.
What if it really was Dora who unconditionally loved Harry and Dolores Day who left him after inhabiting Dora's body? It might have been a similar situation with the historical Dolores Day herself. Before she became an innocent, she had a husband whose only role was to introduce her to the court. After that, he vanished from her life. It seems like he too, just like Harry, was a remnant of her old life that she abandoned after taking on a new identity. That is, after she was taken over by whatever immortal entity would soon after assume the role of the innocent Dolores Day. Another hint at this reincarnation mechanic seems to be archived in Harry's case files. Through them you learn about the so-called Next World mural, an enormous graffito of a man and a woman kissing with a text overlay that says,
"True love is possible only in the next world. For new people, it is too late for us."
The mural was painted in Courant, where Harry and Dora used to live. Harry, who was otherwise a detective with an overwhelming clearance rate, never found out who was behind it. It is possible that Dora, or Dolores, commissioned it as a last message to Harry. The part about it being too late for us would then not mean a group or generation, but them as a couple in particular. It applies to them that love is only possible as new people in their new lives. Dora even quotes the mural when she tells you how,
I can only think that way about new people.
And after all, Harry and Dora have in fact become new people. Dora through her transformation into Dolores, and Harry through the loss of his memories and old identity to the Pale. Fittingly, when you discuss the memory erasing effects of the Pale Hole with Sona, you gain the thought cleaning out the rooms, which reflects on the loss of your identity. The thought solution, just like Dora and the mural, mentions a new life, and the last line says,
"She'll be coming soon. That is all."
Kim is
She's reincarnated? I feel like here's my theory, okay? Harry lost his memories, and so doesn't remember what Dora looks like, but he saw the painting in the church of a woman. Of Dolores, which is a similar name. So that he's just like picturing his ex as this goddess because that's the woman that he's seen. Like it's a woman that he's seen recently, you know? Like yes, he's seen other women as well throughout the game, but this one like didn't speak to him, I guess, so he can like impose whatever voice or personality he wants onto her image. That's my take. I don't subscribe to the reincarnation personally. The whole new people thing is, you know, she like outgrew Harry essentially in some way. So she became like a new person. I do the new person thing for Harry losing his memories though. I could get behind. I don't know. I feel like reincarnation is a little far. And that she broke up with him because she became a freaking goddess. I don't know.
A moral intern spy. Now, I am well aware that Kim being a spy is way more of a crackpot theory than Trant or Klaasje being one. With those two, I'm pretty sure that there's something going on, while with Kim, it's more of a meme at this point. But if we entertain the theory for a second, then we have to acknowledge that Kim, although he has mixed feelings about the moral intern, retains a certain sympathy for their political program and to a degree actually believes in their so-called global peacekeeping mission.
Yes, the international community's mission in Revachol. And the moral intern, more broadly. The RCM was formed by the coalition government to restore order in the international zone after the revolution. So we did. Now we attempt to maintain that order. No more, no less.
It is no coincidence that he, just like Trant, functions as a representative of the moral intern in the corresponding questline.
The moral intern are a fact. I try not to have opinions on facts until they change. And it doesn't look like that's about to happen.
It is more than that. There's some kind of affection in him.
But what sparked my initial interest in the spy theory is that Harry, or rather the voices in his head, feel uneasy with constantly being observed by him.
Do you feel that? That tingle on the back of your neck, like you're being watched. There, the lieutenant. Isn't it suspicious how he's always there, watching you, listening to you?
When you address your concerns with Kim and confront him with the hard fact that he has been following you around the entire time, he will insist that he simply has to keep an eye on you due to your condition.
Frankly, Detective, you are in a deranged state. I can't let you proceed without close supervision.
But Kim didn't just observe you during the case. He arrived in Martinez 2 days before the start of the game and seems to have had his eye on you since then. He at least knows that you have spent those previous days drinking.
What he means is, he has been trying to meet up with you for 2 days.
You drank last night and the night before.
So somehow Kim saw what Harry has been up to for the last 2 days and still he did not interact with him at all. At the same time, Kim didn't lift a finger to start working or at least preparing the case, which ironically is something that he will scold you for.
So, the body is still in the tree.
This is the first time you detect a weariness in the lieutenant's voice.
It's almost as if working the case was never his priority when he was sent to Martinez to meet up with you. Instead, he spent his time watching you. But what made me the most suspicious is that Kim is actively trying to prevent Harry from inquiring about Pale mechanics. When Joyce gives you a desperately needed rundown of the world you're in, Kim will stop your conversation with an unusual persistence once the Pale is mentioned.
The Pale is not, technically speaking, part of reality.
Yes. Also, I think we've had enough excitement for today. We do have a case to attend to.
You could sneak back later when he's not around.
I don't think your colleague would appreciate that.
The same happens when you want to talk to the old Pale driver about anthroponetic phenomena.
She's just a distracted old woman. We should maybe let her get back to her things.
You hear that, Loman? I don't think your partner likes you spending too much time with me.
Surprised by the lieutenant's unusual rudeness, Drama suggests that
it's because of the Pale. He doesn't want your frail mind caught up in it. And this woman has spent time in the Pale. A lot of time.
Drama is our lie detector, and if you remember Kim telling us about the church raid, it also kicks in when he tells us how he doesn't know why the raid happened.
It was a clandestine operation. I don't know anything about it, why it was conducted or who participated. I try not to pry into extra-district matters.
A very, very skilled thespian would detect a touch of drama when he says he doesn't know why it was conducted. A pang of guilt. The lieutenant is leaving something out.
So maybe Kim was informed about Harry's suspicious behavior around the anthroponetic phenomena during the church raids. He could have then been sent to check up on him and report back. We have, after all, already established that the moral intern takes special interest in individuals with anthroponetical and extra-physical affinities. But lastly, just to assure you, a quick spy job would of course not be exclusive to him starting to genuinely care for Harry over the course of their joint investigation. Again, please let me know your thoughts on this. The game is huge and there will always be something that I missed or didn't consider. Harry is an innocence, or perhaps something that is even more significant and more dangerous. We already know that Harry has extra physical abilities, manifesting a knowledge that he has no business knowing, and predictions about the town's future that will turn out to be true. This already puts him in the vicinity of innocences who are also said to have impossible knowledge and predictive powers. And while innocences are supposed to be representatives of Elysium's world spirit, we know that Harry can at least commune with a small yet not irrelevant part of that spirit, the soul of Ravachol.
I am a fragment of the world spirit, the genius Loki of Ravachol.
Now, when we're talking about the definition of innocences, we have to take all their criteria with a grain of salt. After all, most of our knowledge about them is sanctioned by the founding party, an institution that deifies carefully selected individuals to give their own politics a sense of sublime inevitability. But if we assume the minimal definition of innocences, then they are historic individuals imbued with the power to predict or change the fate of Elysium. And the local spirit of Ravachol demands nothing less of Harry than to do exactly that.
No, I didn't dance. I tried to on the last day, remember? I don't no, you were there. I failed the check, so I couldn't dance. It was very sad.
Move through my streets freely in motor carriages and on foot. You have access to the hidden places. Death, it is terrifying. I need you to protect me from death. I cannot perish. I need you. You can keep me on this earth. Be vigilant. I love you.
Ravachol assigns Harry the role of a historic individual. Only he seems to have the freedom and the agency to intervene in the fate of the city. That, of course, doesn't make him an innocence yet. But if you remember the topic of Dora and Dolores from earlier, you will notice that her fate, in which an ordinary human is overwritten by an innocentic being, is mirrored in the fate of Harry. He too loses his old life and has his identity overwritten. But he becomes something else. He becomes us.
Monday morning. The moment you arrived in this reality, you are the first crack in the sheer face of God. From you it will spread.
The start of the game, and with it the arrival of us, the player, at 7:30 in the morning on the first day of the game, seems to have introduced a break to the history of Elysium. When we talked about the Feld computers, we looked at how Harry has the habit of interacting with his world as a game, like a player who is confronted with NPCs and interacts with them through trees and rhizomes. In other words, both the fact that Disco Elysium is a game and that it's played through Harry are represented in the inner logic of the game itself. Fittingly, the ominous Half-Light monologue from a moment ago continues to quote a cryptic fragment from Heraclitus.
Ulogu theodos, xino zausin, ipoli osidien, echondes phronisen.
Did I mention that Heraclitus is Hegel's favorite pre-Socratic philosopher? Anyway, his line roughly says that although the Logos, meaning the order of the world, encompasses all individuals alike, each of them still acts as if their own mind constitutes its own totality. Put differently, it says that while humans share an objective reality with each other, they still tend to only perceive themselves as true subjects with agency and self-consciousness, while the outside world, and especially its inhabitants, only exist as a projection of one's own singular subjective mind. It is no coincidence that this is, of course, game logic. You are the player and everyone else is an unconscious NPC. In our world, this kind of solipsism is not a verifiable or falsifiable theory. But since the world of Elysium does, in fact, behave like a game, with Harry being the protagonist, things become interesting. When you talk to the Phasmid, it elaborates on why it addressed you as a miracle, meaning something that is out of the ordinary for Elysium.
You're a violent and irrepressible miracle. The vacuum of cosmos and the stars burning in it are afraid of you. Give me enough time, you will wipe us all out and replace us with nothing, just by accident. You are extreme, all engulfing madness, ominously new to the planet. Few of us can begin to imagine the horror of you, with all of creation reflected in your forebrain. Everything your eyes touch goes back there, behind the nose mirror. What if you blink? Are we still here?
It seems like we, the player, and by extension Harry, might in fact be the all-encompassing subject of Elysium, the solipsistic consciousness that contains the totality of its world. It fits Half-Light's description of us as
the first crack in the sheer face of God.
A crack in the makeup of Elysium that, like Half-Light said, formed at the exact moment the game started. Or in other words, at the exact moment when Elysium became the setting of a game with Harry as its protagonist. I don't want to follow that thought to its ultimate conclusion yet though. That honor will belong to the very last topic of the Iceberg, where everything will make way more sense once we connect it to the mystery of the Pale. Before that, we will have a last look at the mystery surrounding Neha, the novelty dice maker. Dice saved the dice maker. The Doom commercial building bears its name for a good reason. When you enter it, you first stumble through the dark ruins of failed businesses, including the Fortress Accident Studio that we covered before. But if you soldier on and manage to contact Neha, the dice maker, through the chimney, she will grant you entry into her cozy workshop that sits atop the abandoned companies as the sole survivor. In her shop she designs and manufactures intricate novelty dice, mainly for RPG enthusiasts. Somehow her business was spared from the curse of the building.
And then there is me. I've been here for 14 years, selling novelty dice to role-playing enthusiasts. Not exactly a million-real business idea, yet somehow I've survived despite the talk of malicious energies. Strange, isn't it?
If you found out about the 2mm pale hole in the church, you can tell her that you traced back the curse to pale interferences.
A curse is something superstitious, but a 2mm hole in reality? We all know what it means. It's pale.
What's left unanswered, however, is why her workshop was left unaffected by it, while all others succumbed to it. My theory is that it all comes down to her unique product. A 12-sided die is one of the 3 illustrations made for Sacred and Terrible Air, the other ones being the airship Hanankur and a floating train station. The die was drawn for the book's epilogue that plays 70 years before its main story. It belongs to the eccentric composer Comte Emile, who uses it both as a composition tool and as a baton to conduct his equally eccentric 12-tone compositions. But as it turns out, his audience doesn't share his musical sensibilities for avant-garde post-tonal music. The only man who was fond of his dissonant composition was Ion Rodionov, the mathematician of the imminent communist revolution and the man who researched weapons of mass negation. As he approached the composer to express his admiration, he casually recites the phonetic alphabet to spell the term absolute negation. It's the same term that would soon echo from the Rodionov Trench, the pale superdeep that will be named after him. Rodionov tells Emile that despite his unpopular performance, his 12-tone music will ultimately be famous, since it is the sound of the pale and will soon cover the entire world. Your music, he says, will reach us from the true end, where all matter is but memory. Now, 12-tone music isn't a unique part of Elysium's world building, but a very real method of musical composition. Most of our music is based on the system of tonality, which is an arrangement of notes into keys and hierarchies, with the central tonic or home note serving as a constant point of reference. A song usually goes through a bunch of movement and tension, only to repeatedly resolve itself by returning to its tonal home, where the music feels at rest and provides us with a sense of closure. 12-tone music subverts this pattern by abolishing the central tonic and releasing its harmonic structure into what its composers like to call emancipated dissonance. In 12-tone music, every note is of equal importance since they are now only related to each other instead of a central bass. This is ensured by playing each of the 12 tones on the chromatic cycle once before any of them can be repeated. The result is a melody where the notes are related only to each other in a dynamic structure that develops independent of a tonal resolution. Back in Elysium, of course, the question remains, why would Emil's 12-tone music be the sound of the Pale, and how does this possibly circle back to the dice maker's humble workshop? When I first talked about the Pale in this video, I introduced it as an entropic effect, a state of randomness and disorder. It's why the study of the Pale is called anthroponetics after all. The Pale disintegrates reality into its disjointed elements. It creates an ocean of non-identity where everything that was once structurally centered dissolves into free-floating information. In regards to 12-tone music, this should ring a bell. In the Pale, shreds of memories belong to a single human being, as little as a note in Emil's composition belongs to a tonal center. There's a reason why Arnold Schönberg, who was arguably the most prominent 12-tone composer of our world, called it a project about the emancipation of dissonance. Just like the Pale, it creates a dynamism of partial elements that were once subordinated and anchored to a fixed core. This is why Rodionov recognizes Emil's music as the sound of the Pale. In the case of Emil, however, there's one more element to his music that adds an aspect of randomness to it: his 12-sided die. While composing 12-tone music is usually a very technical and precise activity, he seems to transform it into aleatoric music, where a part of the composition is left to chance and the roll of a die. As a random number generator, his die too works as an instrument of entropy, further reinforcing his music's similarity to the nature of the Pale. His die is also what finally leads us back to the mystery of the novelty dice maker, whose business was inexplicably spared from Pale interferences. My hypothesis is that since she is a professional manufacturer of random number generators, she's in the entropy business anyway, so there's little for the Pale interferences to interrupt. Because what is the Pale going to do? Make her dice more random? That would make for a great sales pitch, if anything. But additionally, her vocation involves moving beyond the simple opposition of entropic and negentropic forces, or disorder and order. Her dice are, of course, tools to create randomness, but at the same time they're functionally bound to the highly controlled and rule-based environments of the RPGs in which they are used. I mention this because there's one more instance in Disco Elysium where a number generator combines randomness and mathematical precision in order to avert the effects of the Pale.
A Pale latitude compressor is used to sort of make the Pale more manageable. With a lot of these, you can force a radio signal grid on the Pale, literally crunch the distance across it. At the upper limit is the large prime number generator station. It's used specifically for Pale latitude compression.
Pale compressors suppress the Pale by transmitting random yet mathematically complex numbers into it. So perhaps it's not too far-fetched that the dice maker's own little yet intricate number generators might have a similar effect. Anthroponetics Level 3, Elysium is self-aware. At the start of this layer, we talked about how the inner logic of Elysium seems to correspond to that of a video game. It's made up of lists, trees, rhizomes, and stochastically determined timelines that are subject to the roll of a die. A little later, we've shown instances where the city, Half-Light, and the Phasmid address Harry as the game's player or protagonist. This very last topic is, in a way, the natural conclusion of these aspects with regard to the Pale. I want to show you a clip of my colleague David asking Disco Elysium writer Agutulik what the Pale really is.
Here's the thing with the world of Elysium. The world of Elysium is a fictional world, but the fictional world that is aware that it is fictional. In a way, you could think of Pale as what happens when a reader puts down the book and puts the book away. When you're reading it, the characters are vivid. You put it away, you move on in your life. They keep existing in your head. The world keeps existing. But how long does it take when you think back and the characters start melding into each other a little bit? Some characters start fading from your memory. And in the same way, in Sacred and Terrible Air, there's the model of the Harnoncourt, the aerostatic. Papartsumian, who sells it to sells it to Khan, Enad Khan. He tells Khan, you need to spend time with it. You need to sort of mentally acknowledge it. As long as you remember, then it exists. Like when no one remembers it anymore, it stops existing. It is kind of like an acknowledgement to the fictional nature of Elysium and the writer's relationship to its creation and the reader's relationship to it.
And if you think about it, the effects of the Pale indeed mirror the process of being forgotten. When the memory of a person becomes faded, they slowly start losing their names and distinct identities, and they might even fuse together with your memories of other people. The world around them becomes blurry and slowly starts to disintegrate. The example that Argo is using to illustrate his point is one that we already featured, the airship Hanankur that ventured into a pale superdeep and vanished from everyone's memories. The only remembrances left of it are old miniatures, which have to be actively observed and engaged with to not follow their original into oblivion. This lets us frame our conversation with the Phasmid in a new light, because we now know what it is afraid of being forgotten by you together with its entire world.
The Pale too came with you. Its advent coincides with the arrival of the human mind, with all of creation reflected in your forebrain. You are extreme, all engulfing madness. You're a violent and irrepressible miracle. The vacuum of cosmos and the stars burning in it are afraid of you. Everything your eyes touch goes back there, behind the nose mirror. What if you blink? Are we still here? Please don't blink. What if he misplays us all one day? Or just forget?
Just like the Hanankur, Elysium needs to be witnessed and cherished to not fade into oblivion or the Pale. Once it is forgotten, it would vanish with all of its inhabitants. This precarious reality of fictional worlds is brought up in another dialogue in the game, when you discuss a fantasy world that exists within Elysium.
The man from Helmdale is the hero of a series of popular books based on a fictional version of Kotla. In fact, most people don't think that man from Helmdale ever really existed, but they are wrong.
Helmdale isn't a real place.
Neither is the man a real man, of course, but both the man and Helmdale are an ontological necessity. But hey, it's not worth getting into an argument about.
Wow, what?
I mean, even if the man from Helmdale didn't exist before the adventure novels, the stories have made it so that he has. It's simple, really.
His theory isn't exactly incoherent, but its logic does suggest some unusual neural activity. Interesting.
Roy is, of course, not a reliable narrator, and we surely also hear his Parolidon habit speaking. But if the dialogue proves one thing, it's that the concept of a fiction establishing its own reality, even if it's just behind our nerve mirrors, isn't foreign to Disco Elysium. Helmdale gained its reality by being invented and engaged with, and it will lose its reality again once it is eventually forgotten. And just like Helmdale, the world of Elysium too was already doomed from the moment it was dreamed up and opened its gates to us. After all, when we ask Half-Light when the countdown to the end of Elysium started, he tells us that the world was doomed from the very moment we entered it.
Monday morning, the moment you arrived in this reality, you are the first crack in the sheer face of God.
There is, however, something beautiful to this. If Elysium maintains its reality as long as it's experienced and explored, then we delay its eventual demise by playing Disco Elysium. And while I was making this video, its world definitely gained in detail and reality for me, as it hopefully did for you. In a way, we're all doing our best to keep Harry and his friends out of the Pale for a little longer.
True. Wow.
This has been by far the most comprehensive video I have ever made. But it has already inspired a few more projects that will make it to the channel in the near future, both about Disco Elysium and adjacent topics. There are also still some chapters left that didn't make it on this iceberg. So if you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe to the channel to stay informed about future uploads. I also appreciate every comment under this video, no matter if you have your own crackpot theory or just want to say hi. And if you want to see your name at the end of the next video, I opened up channel memberships for those who want to further support the channel. A few brave pioneers have already
Inception is kind of a way to describe it, yeah. There was a lot. That was a lot to digest. It's cool though. Like the fact that the game knows it's a fictional game, and that was confirmed by the writer in that interview. That's cool. That's really cool. Just the fact that a fictional world like stops existing after you stop consuming it. Like you turn off the show, you close the book, you shut off the game. And like it exists in your mind, right? You remember it, but it will slowly like fade or kind of get jumbled up. The details become muddy. That's cool. That's a cool narrative on like consumption of fictional stories. That's very cool. What a good video. I clap. I clap for a good video. I also was asked to watch this animation. I can't clap. I don't have fucking hands. I'm a VTuber.
There's a mercenary out back. He's been hanged. The body has been there for a week now. The locals probably got tired of it and called the cops.
Hello, I'm Kim Kitsuragi.
Time to get to work.
There is a dead body in the tree. Someone has to figure out who put it there.
We did this.
A metal payphone.
If we don't, no one else will.
You dial the number, as you've done many times. Calling.
This is Precinct 57.
Calling.
What brings you up here again?
Calling.
Can't say it's a pleasure, officer.
Still calling. Then the ocean breaks.
Hello?
I missed.
Not true. He purposefully over-aimed and shot the window. You had him second-guessing himself. Only for a second. Do not assume he will miss the next time. Stop. Think. You can detect floor plans, bullet trajectories. This is a fight we can win. A plume of smoke and fire erupts from the gun. To your right, the killer raises his rifle and takes aim at you.
God, please.
A swarm of angry lead passes mere millimeters from your side, tearing fabric off your coat. 2 shots ring at once. One from the lieutenant's pistol, and the other from the pole. The realization comes to you. Here it comes.
Sunrise, Parabellum.
Harry.
This was really good work, Detective.
The lieutenant gives a smile only you can see.
Okay, he did something.
Detective. Arriving. On the scene.
Aww. That was a cute animation. That was very cute. Have you guys seen the hold on. Have you guys seen the animation going around on Twitter? This one right here. Look at how beautiful this artist's animation is. It's beautiful! What a fucking beautiful animation! Oh my god. It's so good. Yeah. Like, this shot right here. That's crazy. That's insane. Yeah, I'm starting to get some Disco Elysium on my Twitter timeline, and I'm having a great time. I love every time a post comes up on my feed. There's so much good art. So good. that kind of wraps up Disco Elysium for me though. We've played the game, we've watched the Iceberg. I will forever want to see more stuff on like Twitter. I have a link to the book now, thanks to a chatter. I've got a link to the book, so I can actually read it. It's in English translation. So I've got that on my read list now. Man, it's been a trip with this game. I kind of want to replay it and try to pick like the worst fucking options that just make Harry like a complete fucking jackass. Maybe I will eventually. Oh, I don't want Disco to end. I don't want Disco to end, guys. Alexa, play Despacito. I think that's all for stream for me today, though. Dude, I had one drink and they made that my entire personality. I'm still pissed about it. I'm still pissed about it. I drank one drink on the very last fucking day. I do not smell dinner. That's incorrect. If they got a system or there's a fan-made one. I don't know. Yeah, the game has dice rolls though. I mean dinner is being prepared as I speak. It could maybe a little bit entice me. But I mean I did what I wanted to do on stream today. I reacted to the Iceberg. We saw a couple other things.
I smell dinner open parentheses. I am eating it right now closing parentheses.
Open parentheses, closing parentheses. Thank you for that. Apparently my cat has been fed. That's what I'm learning right now. I did hear the microwave. But yeah. Disco, that puts a close on Disco. We're closing it and it's gonna be lost to the pale forever. Because I'm not staring at it. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna think about now. That's crazy.